Good evening, everybody, and good evening to anybody that's watching online. Welcome to this Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting. My name is Councillor Steve Bartlett, and I'm the chair of this meeting, at least for the start of it. And before I do anything else, I'd like to invite Claire to give the housekeeping rules for the meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the front car park. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Before I go on to apologies, I'd just like to welcome Councillor John Beasley as a member of this committee. And thank you for joining us, John. And
Thank you,
so we've got, I think it's Sandra Macro. Welcome to the committee. Nice to have you. So agenda item 1, apologies. Do you have any apologies? I think we've got quite a few by the looks of it.
We do have a few apologies, Chair, and apologies if I miss anyone. So we have apologies from Councillor Phil Broadhead, Leslie Dedman, Sandra Moore, Lisa Northover and Tony Trent.
Thank you. And we have substitutes for most of those, I believe.
We have substitutes for everyone. Yes, we've got Councillor Cameron Adams for Councillor Broadhead, Paul Hilliard for Councillor Dedman, Claire Waite for Councillor Moore, Brian Castle for Councillor Northover and Councillor Tarling for Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Claire. So we're going to be electing the chairman to start with, and as I intend to stand as chair again for this year, I'm going to hand the meeting over to the vice chair to conduct the election. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So are there any nominations for the chair of the committee?
Thank you. I nominate Stephen Bartlett.
Okay, and do I have a seconder for that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to second.
Are there any other nominations? No? Okay, so that means Councillor Bartlett is elected.
Thank you, members. I appreciate that, and I look forward to another year of scrutiny with all its challenges. So with that, we now need to go to agenda item 3 still, and it's the election of the vice chair. Members, do I have any proposals for vice chair? Councillor Tarling.
Happy to propose Councillor Aikenhead if she wishes to stand.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. Are there any other nominations? No? Okay, members, thank you. Well, congratulations. Vice Chair, you're duly elected. Thank you. Okay, declarations of interest, members. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests on any items on the agenda? It appears not. Okay, thank you. So we move on to agenda item 6, confirmation of minutes. Does anybody have any problem with the minutes from the last meeting, either accuracy or content? No. Okay, we'll take those as read then. Agenda item 7, public issues. Do we have any public issues, please, Claire?
There's none for this meeting, Chair.
My goodness, that's a change. Yeah. Oh, there's a change. Okay. Agenda item 8. Now, I think I'm going to just change the order, if you don't mind, members. Councillor Slade is just tied up with an issue, and she would be leading on this item. So if you don't mind, I'd like to bring agenda item 9 forward, which is the transformation programme update, if that's all right with you. Councillor Hannah, are you okay to bring that forward now? Thank you. So in which case, I won't preempt anything you start. I'll let you introduce the paper first, but I have to say it was an excellent paper. Thank you.
So thank you, Chairman. As the report states, it was prepared for the Cabinet meeting on the 10th of April and was considered there. I'm not sure why it did not come to overview and scrutiny before the Cabinet meeting, but at this stage, Cabinet has noted the report as recommended with no changes on overall policy. Cabinet also informally noted that the cross-party transformation working group has been meeting regularly to look in more detail at various aspects of transformation. As a member of the working group yourself, Chair, you will be aware of that. I would like to express appreciation to all members of the working group for their input into the process. That said, there is a clear role for overview and scrutiny to review progress, and I'm sure that comments and recommendations from yourselves can be taken into consideration as we move forward. Officers are ready online to respond to any queries members of the committee may have. Overall, the report demonstrates good progress being made on the various elements of the programme. It sets this out in 3 sections. Progress on organisational design is described in paragraphs 4 to 9. This confirms that all the key technical elements are now in place, with some good data use cases in housing and children's services. The forward focus of this in the coming months will be delivering better customer-facing systems in the services, and all councillors will have received an email from the team on Thursday about the strategy being followed in reviewing the website, which is one of the key ways in which residents come to the council for information, to report issues or to make payments, as well as having received a further email from myself underlining the amount of work involved in this and expressing appreciation for the work the team is undertaking. Progress on where and how we work is covered from paragraph 10 onwards. This confirms the initial phase having been completed and explains that work is now focused on 4 key areas: modernising the civic space in the BCP Civic Centre, accelerating the vacating of properties that are surplus to requirements, establishing community hubs, the clustering of services in various locations in our communities, and a review of our depots to establish a fit-for-purpose operational hub. Some of this work overlaps with the current library review, and some of it involves reviewing the use of properties where ward councillors will have a particular interest in how these can best be used to meet the needs of the local communities. And officers are focused on how best to tie together these strands and consult with ward councillors in the process. Progress on supporting our colleagues is then described from paragraph 18 onwards. The full development of the people strategy remains dependent on financial pressures and has been reprioritised to support wider organisational changes, such as the voluntary redundancy programme. But progress includes a new recruitment system having been implemented, a leadership development system having been implemented, and a major focus will be on the development of performance management to support staff and managers to achieve their objectives. Lastly, the overall programme is now at the start of its 5th and final year, and the Transformation Board is now beginning to think about the completion of the final elements of the programme. As I mentioned, our officers are online and are ready to respond to any questions. But while I have the floor, may I just comment on the fact that Katie Lacey, who has been both responsible for the massive programme in IT and who has of late been responsible for the entire transformation programme, will shortly be leaving us. And may I express appreciation to her for all that she has done for BCP and for her support to the Transformation Working Group and to myself as portfolio holder, and wish her well for the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Yeah, I would like to echo our thanks to Katie Lacey for the work and contribution that she's made to the transformation programme. And I have to say, I wonder what we're going to do without her. We really miss her, and she has done a fantastic job. And thank you, Katie. Now, the reason we brought this paper before the committee is because, as you're aware, Councillor Aikenhead and myself are the rapporteurs secretly planted onto the transformation working group to keep an eye on what's going on. And this is and it's our job to bring to the committee issues that arise from that working group, you know, and if we sense that there are any problems or issues, then we undertook to bring them to you. But I'm glad to say we haven't actually identified any problems. But when this paper was presented to the cabinet, what I felt it did was give a really good overview of the history, the current status, and where we are going with the transformation programme. Now, it's a complex programme, and for most people it's been really difficult to get your head around what this programme actually means, what it's doing. And in particular, we all know that our MTFP is underpinned by the success of the transformation programme. And in this report, you can see how that underpinning is managed into the MTFP. So it does give a really comprehensive overview really of what the transformation programme has done, is doing, and will do in the future. And I have to say that, and I think we've mentioned before, that there were green shoots emerging from the programme. And I think we can say that, you know, if the forecasts that are made in this report come into fruition, then we will be able to say that the transformation programme, certainly financially, will have been a great success, for which I have to say, probably the government is benefiting more, probably, than we are around this table. My hope is that transformation will lead to real differences to residents. And that's the bit that we've yet to see materialise in a serious way. So that's the background to why the paper is in front of you. And I hope it, you know, has given you a really good feel for what the transformation programme is about. So with that, I'd like to open it up for comments. Bearing in mind, of course, this paper has already gone through cabinet. It was for noting anyway. But if anybody does have any recommendations or comments they'd like to bring forward to present to cabinet, then please say so. So, Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Hannah, for presenting this. It's actually something that somebody's contacted me about, a problem with the recruitment process and the collection system. I believe that, I don't know if this has been resolved, but if a opening on the recruitment system goes past its deadline date, it actually terminates the opening and then sends out letters of sorry, you're not successful, and it's requiring the hiring manager to actually check and keep that open, and that there's potential that let's just say candidates that may want to be considered are actually getting rejection letters.
I think that was probably for Director of Personnel, People and Culture, Sarah Dean, if you're on the call, which I think, yes, there she is. Is that something you can comment on, Sarah, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Bartlett. I don't actually know the answer to it, so I'm just making a note, and I think I'm going to have to take that away and get the team to look into that, because that doesn't sound like something we would want to happen, obviously. So yeah, leave that one with me, and I will pick that one up.
Councillor Tarling, you content with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to reply to Ms. Dean in detail if that's required.
Yes, please.
Okay, Councillor,
sorry, thank you, Chair. So for disclosure, I'm also on the transformation working group, and as you said, there were a little bit of misunderstanding of where we were, whatever, and I think since Councillor Hannah's taken over and the working group's been there with transparency, and this committee has enlightened a lot of people, and I think it's moved forward. What I was interested in is obviously the programs, in particular the dynamics, finance and operations. Is it possible to give an example, a working example of where teams have worked smarter, seen their budget available, and maybe savings? For me, one of the reasons I became a councillor was I got frustrated that one week my road got swept, the next week the hedges got cut and the road was a mess. So is there better data management of where we know the staff are and teams talk to each other? Thank you.
Is that one for Katie or one for Matty?
I'm happy to pick that one
Yeah,
up
Katie, okay,
initially.
thank you.
Interesting question. In terms of F&O, the finance and HR system, I think probably the biggest advocate of that is the chief executive, who has access, and so do all managers and members, to a Power BI report which drills down in almost live time what the status of the budgets are. So he can drill down to that into meetings. I've seen him do it. I've listened to him do it. I know that he's asked a question, oh, how much do we spend on that? And somebody in the meeting has used the report, drilled down into it, and instantly provided the answer. So from that perspective, I would say that we are significantly a large step forward. I also know that managers had access to this year's budgets 5 months ahead of where they would have done typically. So they've got instant access to the 24-25 budget, whereas previously they might have had to have waited until potentially August or September to have access to that information. So I think that's working really well. Specifically with regard to your question around, are we organising our people better to do things more efficiently? That's not necessarily just part of the F&O system. That's part of the how we work and the way we work and all of the elements that we've put in place. Absolutely, that is the intention. And part of what we've got is what we call our common data platform. So we're now able to get better insights into how we do things by connecting previously separate data sets together, so that we can ask ourselves better questions and we can visualize some of those answers potentially on a geospatial map, so we can see where hotspots of graffiti issues might be, for example. So I'll stop there, but
No, that's great. Thanks, Dan.
Sorry, yeah, okay. I think you touched on something where you've got an overlap of data insight and analytics as opposed to the ERP system. And I think we've mentioned this before, Chief Exec, that it'd be very handy if members could have a demonstration of the functionality of the ERP system now that it's starting to sort of mature a bit. It's been around for a few months now, and I think it would be, members would benefit from some presentation of that. Claire, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, as we've heard, the transformation programme is baked into the NTFP. And also on page 33 of the agenda, we have savings from the transformation investment programme specifically associated with a list of things. One of those is the integration of library services with customer-facing services and community hubs. Libraries is mentioned elsewhere in the paper as well. But we currently at the moment have a library consultation open where we are asking people, what kind of services they want in their libraries. Do they want to access customer services in that way? So I'd just like to hear from a portfolio holder how that consultation is sort of a genuine exercise when it seems like a foregone conclusion, given that it's built into this transformation.
That one for you, Councillor Hannah.
I think the answer is yes, it is a genuine exercise, but we are looking at how we integrate the various elements of the review in order to achieve the savings that we want to achieve. And we've had an officer meeting along with Councillor Andy Martin and other portfolio holders who are invested in community hubs, etc., to look at how best to progress, how best to draw the different elements together, which is something I mentioned in the introduction.
But there are some elements of the transformation program that relate to the operation model, and there are elements of that transformation program that, particularly in terms of community involvement, I believe, and partnerships, which still need further work and are still being worked within the. And I think this probably falls into that area. But maybe the Chief Executive would like to comment further on that.
Happy just to add that the concept of the empowering council and enabling council as well, where we're trying to say, well, does the council need to do these things, or can the community do it, you know, for themselves and get a better product as a result? So we are looking at working with the community groups to get a better outcome. When you look at the libraries, you know, we've tiered them. You know, we've got the 3 main libraries. What do we do with the other libraries and the opening hours? I think all relate to that. So I think the work that Matty's doing is really about, okay, we've got the budget challenges on one side, but also how do we provide the best library service? And I think it's later, I can't remember if it's this month or next month, but we get the whole library service onto a single platform, which they haven't been in the past, but on 3 different IT systems. So we get it onto a single system. And that's where, just to pick up the Chair's earlier comments, a lot of the work that we've been doing has been the fundamentals of how the council operates and not visible to the customers. Yeah, once we've got that in place, we can then start building the customer facing systems. And that's the stage that we're at now. So we will see a new planning system go live. We will see a new environment system go live. We'll see the new library system go live. That's when the customers will really see the difference. And then when you get back to libraries, we'll say, okay, what do we really want to provide in those localities? And I generally believe that consultation is an open one. Yes, we've got budget constraints, but how do we best provide the service within those budget constraints? That's what we're looking at.
You okay with that, Claire? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, I'm also on the transformation working group, and really I just wanted to, like the other councils have done, give you a little bit of an impression of what I've thought about being on that working group and how I've found the project. I believe this is a very, very huge, ambitious project. And when I first became a councillor and I sat there in the presentation and Graham Ferrant was there saying, this is the biggest thing that anyone's ever done anywhere. It's so exciting. And I was thinking, oh dear, what have I let myself in for, getting onto this council that's doing this awful great big project, because great big projects are usually a great big nightmare. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to be on the transformation working group. So I believe that over the year we have got to a stage where we're now much more, we have improved in terms of we've got control of what's going on with the IT. We know what the timescales are, we know what the scope is, and things seem a lot more settled in terms of the project. And it has gone from a situation where I first thought, oh dear, this is going to be a disaster, to, oh yes, actually we are going to be able to finish this project, which is a really good place to be. But I would say that, but I would never say with a big project that I can't see any problems, because there's always problems in there when you've got a big project. And if you can't see them, then you're not looking hard enough. So it's really important that we do keep looking. I think at the next transformation working group, we're going to be looking at culture, how it fits in. The IT is fitting in with the culture in the council. I think it's really useful for us to be looking at different things, really deep diving into things. And also, I believe one of the things that we're going to do, one of them is to actually look at what is the resident's experience. How does this affect the resident? Because in the end, the transformation project is essentially an IT project, and it's been run in quite a technical way, and the resident don't care about what IT you use. They don't care. All they care about is what service they get. So I think we're going in the right direction there. We're looking at the right things, but we need to keep going with that, because there is we really do need to improve quite a lot in terms of the service that we give our residents. And what we need to do is really look at how we can use this new technology to make sure we're definitely doing that. Okay, so yes, we're on the right track, but we haven't got there yet. So let's keep going.
Thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Any more members? Councillor Adams.
Hi, specifically on the pay and reward bit, caveated by saying the chief executive's updates have been quite interesting and helpful. I was just looking, obviously you've got GMB and Unison say they're happy with it by the members, and the members of GMB overwhelmingly say they weren't happy with it. The question I have is, what proportion of our staff are with GMB and which proportion are with Unison? Why are Unison happy with it and GMB not? Because obviously part of transformation is getting three sets of staff on the same team with the same pay and the same conditions. Why are one set broadly happy with it and the other union vastly unhappy with it? Sorry if it's been covered in previous meetings, but obviously.
Councillor Hannah, please.
I think the first thing to say is we don't know how the GMB members feel at the moment, because there is the second ballot taking place with the improved offer. So we're awaiting the outcome of that, which I think will be towards the end of this month. But in terms of further understanding, I suspect it's probably Sarah who would be best placed to give that.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah.
Yeah, so please come in, Sarah. Thank you.
I was just going to really add to say that actually we don't have the detail around which of our workforce are union members. The unions aren't obliged to share that information with us, and they haven't. So, you know, we believe that it is the minority. We believe that the majority of the workforce aren't union members, but we don't have definite numbers on that. And as Councillor Hannah said, we've gone into a second process of a ballot just with GMB. And yeah, we are waiting for the outcome of that to know how GMB members feel about the offer as it stands. And as Councillor Hannah says, that will come in on the 31st of May. So we're just waiting for that.
So Adams?
Do we know, because I'm sorry, I completely forgot about the email Graham sent last week about that, but do we know why they weren't happy in the first place? Is there a way to get that information from them, or then what have we done to address that?
Sarah,
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so we did have some information from them when we had the outcome of the first ballot, and they fed back to us kind of what their members had been sharing with them through the process. And the basis of those issues formed kind of the discussions that we subsequently then had in order to kind of try and identify what the improved offer needed to look like for them to be able to go, you know, put a second ballot out to their members with the hope of reaching kind of overall agreement from both trade unions. So there was a sort of a detailed list of things that their members wanted to see some improvements around, mainly relating to the terms and conditions and pay allowances for out of hours sort of non-standard working and the pay rates that were being offered.
Thanks, Adams.
No, that's quite helpful. Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Any other members on this one? Councillor Crispin Connor. Goodall.
Thank you. I just want to ask in generic terms how, when you've got a report of this nature, how councillors are viewed. Are they viewed as employees? In other words, for example, on item 5, and Councillor Aikenhead mentioned this about service, because we're on the ground floor, so to speak. And it says, item 5 says, particularly our HR data, given the continuous organisational change development, the HR dashboards provide staff and managers with visualisations of our organisational structures, reporting lines, as well as management information on the absence levels and headcount counts. Well, while we don't need all that, one of the things as a relative new boy is that we've asked for, and not always had, is a list of who does what. And it seems to me that item 5 is one of these lists, and whether or not we could have a
a truncated list. We don't need information about everybody, about everything, but that is a start of being able to give information. And to be blunt, it also enables us, if we knew what was happening, to get back to officers who don't get back to us with queries. And that would be quite handy too. Thank you.
So that was that a question specifically?
Yes, it was. I just wanted, the question is can we use that? Will that information be given to councillors at the same time as it's given to officers in the council?
Councillor Hannah, yeah.
I would actually say that I share the same concern to a certain extent, because at times it can be difficult to know exactly who is where in the structure. I'm not quite sure which officer is best placed to clarify how that is most easily conveyed.
You can pick that one up. That's definitely something that we're working on at the moment. We've got an initial dashboard. We're just working through some of the details with finance colleagues and people and culture colleagues. We need to make sure, as with all of these things, it sort of sits around making sure the quality of the data is correct in F&O in the first place, to make sure that when we're drilling down to that, we've got the right level of information. So it is in hand, and it is something that we expect to get out at some point this year in terms of that organisational hierarchy, if you like, and company directory. So that's something we are working on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I share your concerns. I say nothing most of us probably, but Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I come to the main part of what I wanted to ask, could I just quickly go back to the pay and reward issue and listen carefully to what was being said by the portfolio holder in terms of the second ballot. I think you said that closes at the end of this month. What I wondered was when we will get feedback in similar format to that that's in the report from that second ballot. Will that come through the Chief Executive's update? And if so, when is that likely to be?
Chair, I don't have specific timing on that, and I would need to defer to Sarah.
Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Good evening, Councillor Beasley. We'll be looking to bring an update just as soon as we can. I think I'm looking at June. So I think off the top of my head, that's the soonest date that we'll be able to get an update report on kind of what the outcome was and what that means in next steps if we have that information at that time.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chairman. The main issue I wanted to ask about, and the Vice Chairman came in actually before I did, but I wanted to expand on it a little bit, is with regard to access to services, reporting of issues, which we all do, I'm sure, as ward councillors on behalf of residents, and general support for residents through the new IT facilities and the new access to the council. It's been a long-standing concern of mine that we need to be clear and we need to test ourselves regularly that the council isn't getting too far ahead of the capabilities and expectations of many residents, particularly those who are either not using IT at all or who are not particularly IT savvy around the council's systems and procedures. In the ward I represent, I'm sure this isn't unique, I come across it almost daily, the frustration of residents in terms of engaging with the council over fairly straightforward issues. And that frustration boils over to ward councillors, and quite rightly, they expect to be able to access that information or to get the responses they're seeking in a fairly quick and straightforward way, as they would have been able to, if you like, previously. And I think my concern is, I've listened to the answers on a number of occasions, but my concern principally is, are we aware and are we testing ourselves to make sure that isn't happening to an undue degree, while still trying to progress the transformation of those services. Because if we don't do that, we're not being straightforward with those residents who are disadvantaged by technology.
That's a very good question, Councillor Beasley. Councillor Hannah?
Well, I think the general answer is that we are trying to make use of technology in order to make the whole system more efficient. And that in itself can provide with more time for those who aren't familiar with IT systems to be supported. That includes, for example, our new telephone system, which is rather more efficient. And because of its efficiency, it's giving telephone receptionists more time to deal with individual queries. But by encouraging as many of those who are IT literate to use the IT systems, relieve workload. I think as well as that, it's worth saying that yes, we know that there are still many residents who are not as comfortable with IT, or who simply don't want to engage with IT. And as well as the telephone system, which is one way of contacting the council, we want to look at the type of community hub and library support system where people will be able to walk in, talk to a member of staff who will be able to help them with their issue, whatever it has to be, and have places across different parts of the BCP area, so that it's reasonably convenient to residents to do that, and they don't have to come into the civic centre offices.
Councillor Beasley?
Well, Chairman, I welcome that response, and I've always been an advocate of trying to put more services, facilities and people into libraries, and they're not there just for the basics of what a library traditionally was there for. And the more we use them for those purposes, the more likely we are to be able to retain them, which I'm sure is something that would echo around this and most other rooms as being supported. The other question I had on this topic was briefly touched on, and that was how I think the Chief Executive was talking about the next phases, and planning was mentioned. If outside of those sort of resident complaints that one gets as a ward councillor, if there's one other issue to do with BCP Council, and no doubt other councils around the country, it is around planning, and it is around being able to get satisfaction by engagement with planning, preferably through planning officers directly, but if not, to at least get answers to emails and other communications. And that is one that comes back to me time and time again. And I wondered within that whether those who are doing that piece of work are fully engaged in terms of understanding those external frustrations that are pretty much at boiling point with some people, and how we really do need to grasp that nettle and deal with it in a way that's going to have longevity of outcome, rather than us thinking that we've dealt with it and it's all going to be all right. Because I know a large organisation like this, or indeed any other council, it is very easy sometimes to think, well, we've done that and we can move on to something else, whereas in fact we haven't dealt with the fundamental in the first place.
Is that one for Katie?
I was going to say, I think the problem is understood, and I think that will include my officers working on it. But yes, Katie may well have more to say.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point to pick up, and I think it is really important that we do check and challenge ourselves. So as we've been going through and doing the website update, we make sure that there is a feedback option on every element of the page, and as we reported to the transformation working group last week, actually we do get some really, it's kind of a double-edged sword. We get some really good feedback in terms of suggestions on there. We do get some people trying to log complaints about services they've received rather than actually making comments on the website. But once we've been through a process of updating each of those pages, and I know that the team are working very closely with Councillor Hannah and Councillor Martin on that to get their views on some of the pages before they're released. Once that has then been done, and because we know the website desperately needs updating. Once that work has then been completed, that will then be the point when we can engage more directly with residents to get their specific feedback about what that site looks like and what will work for them in the future. And as you say, it is absolutely an ongoing continuous improvement activity for the team. But I don't know whether Matty wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, only just in relation to the way we connect the organisation up as well, because I think in the past we've had lots of systems all relatively unconnected, which can make the experience of our customers more kind of fragmented and stilted, in so much as they report a problem, it finds its way to the back office, it might be dealt with, there might be some update, but it might never find its way back to our customers. So by greater connectivity between our services and our customer services in the middle, means that when people do call or they call back, there should be, as we go forward, a greater visibility of where a particular inquiry is, rather than having to send people into the back office again, where they often get stuck or they get lost or they end up in the wrong particular place. So whether it's we can't have one system that caters for all the council services. We understandably are more complex than that, and we have to have lots of systems. But that connectivity between perhaps the system that's dealing with planning or the system that's dealing with environmental inquiries, fly tipping, that kind of thing, that allows the action to come back to the customer services team, or an email or a text message or whatever it might be, go to the customer to update them on the outcome of their inquiry, will also hopefully help manage some of the frustrations that customers understandably experience when they feel they've told us something but they haven't necessarily heard back from it. We've also got functionality developing now around mapping, so that people can look on the website and see where things have been reported. They might not need to feel they need to re-report them, or they can see where that particular thing, that particular issue has got to, whether it's a pothole or it's whatever it might be. And so I think greater visibility of the issues, greater visibility of what we're doing about them, will hopefully help to manage the understandable frustrations that some customers experience when they feel their inquiry is being passed from pillar to post.
I think Chief Exec wanted to come in. Sorry.
I don't know whether I'm going to preempt anything that might be said, but I think what Councillor Beasley has received is a rather wider answer to the question of communications with residents than simply the focus on planning. What I did wonder, given the concern that he's raised, is whether the Transformation Working Group might want to spend some time looking at planning and communication with residents on planning in some greater detail. But I turn to the Chief Executive.
Thanks, Gerald. I would recommend that the working group do look at planning, because it's been one where we've had a planning improvement board in place for some time. And actually, it's a really good microcosm of the transformation journey that we've been on, because there were, in 2019, some planning applications still outstanding from 2015. We felt that was unacceptable. We had 3 different planning systems. You have officers that can't flip from system to system, so actually you can't move your resource appropriately. We've had problems with recruitment. And actually had to get a number of agency staff in, and they don't know the local area. And fundamentally, we haven't had a local plan that sets out the strategic planning framework for the whole area. So actually, the job has been, get the strategic plan in place. We're out to consultations, everybody knows now on that, so we're nearly there on that. Get a new system in place that would allow us to move resources and get people to work in a single way. That should be in place by the end of this calendar year. Recruit wherever we can and get the right people in place in the right structure, and we've done a lot of that, and a new director, new head of development control, and we're seeing the fruits of that now. Get a focus on the backlog, and that's different from dealing with day-to-day work. So how do we get rid of those old cases and deal with them in the most appropriate way? And then look at, so what are our policies and how we're going to implement them going forward to make sure we don't get back into a backlog. I'm now pleased, I don't think we've got any cases that are more than 2 years old or thereabouts. That's not bad. It's a lot better than it was. It's not as good as I want it to be, because I think 2 years is a long time to wait for a planning permission. But we've definitely made improvements, and that's been done with the developers forum, where we're talking to developers right there. And actually, at the last meeting, I've had 2 or 3 comments after the last meeting from people saying it feels like a much better relationship now, much stronger, and we're delivering what they want and what they expect of a local authority. So it is multifaceted, and that's really, you could multiply that by about 50 across each of our services to get what we've had to do in terms of bringing this council into one. And that's one example, I think, where it's been tough, it's been difficult, it's been public, but I think we're in a better place now than we have been.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Waters.
So one time you, when you report a streetlight broken, for example, often there'll be a month or two before a response gets back to the person who's reported it. Often that's because it has been fixed and it hasn't been updated in our system in the back end. Is there any kind of notification in place to maybe message the person who's reported it saying, are you aware if this has been fixed, or do you know if this has been fixed? Because that way they could say a yes or a no in response and maybe close out that ticket automatically, get the residents to work alongside us in that instance. And then sometimes it might be useful as well to have a automated notification making that person aware to reach out to their councillor for escalation if it has been a month or two since that report's gone in. I think that process of report going in, and only when it's fixed someone gets notified, does lead to quite a lot of frustration with our residents. Is there any plans to do anything along those lines in terms of notifications for the residents, check with them and get them to help us, or to notify them to reach out to their councillor for escalation?
Is that one for Matty? Or I think Matty, can you
Yeah.
comment on that? Or can I just say that I think your description of what happens isn't actually what happens, because some services you get an acknowledgement and then you get a notification that works order has been raised, and then you do get notification that the task has been completed. That might not apply to each of the services, but I'll let Matty answer your question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think your point you've just said was actually very accurate, and it probably reflects the fact that the organisation has so many different systems and approaches that we're currently operating. Where we'd like to get to is where the suggestion is in line with the suggestion that was being made, in that there's a greater consistency in how we receive and respond and update customers, rather than it being subject to the particular system that a service may be using. Others might not use a similar system, therefore the experience is very different. We would rather be in a position where if you report something, you know instantly that we've got it, and that ideally if it's going to take a while to resolve it, which is sometimes inevitably the case, then there is some kind of updates that go along to ensure you don't think we've just forgotten about it and we're not going to bother. And that, as I said earlier, the ability of mapping certain kinds of inquiries means that customers can also see that they're still on our radar, and that we can update that functionality so that everybody who might be interested in that particular inquiry can see where it is at any particular time. But definitely the feedback loop is very much part of what we're trying to establish by linking up the systems, which hasn't actually worked as successfully as we would have wanted to in the past. That's very much part of the operating model, and that's what we're working on.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question, which is kind of related. With the customer journey piece, it says that we've got the first few of them set up. It doesn't look like there's quite a lot of them to do. I'm wondering, how many is that first few, and how long until we're likely to have achieved the 130 ones we've got here, and then the 480 after that as well?
Is that one
Yep.
for you? I've seen you commented in the report on this, Katie. Is that one for Matty?
Shall I go, Katie, first?
Yeah, go on, yeah.
I haven't got the precise number. Katie might have the precise number, but it's a small number. But what I was going to kind of emphasise is that the learning and the functionality that we develop in the earlier stages of resolving these customer journeys gets replicated once we've designed it. So the idea is that at the beginning it's a bit slow because we're developing the mapping functionality, for example. But then as we start to introduce more functions on top, we don't have to reinvent that piece of work because we've already done it, and therefore it rapidly becomes quicker and quicker. It also will depend on the complexity of the particular journeys as to how long each one takes to redesign and so on. But going back to comments that have been made earlier, what's really kind of important, is that we have an opportunity to do that and get it right, so that when we replicate it, we're thinking about our customer's journey, we're thinking about how intuitive and easy it is for our customers to use that, and then we kind of replicate the good stuff. So it does start, I think it was always kind of designed and expected to start off a little bit slowly and then pick up a bit of speed. I mean, Katie might have a slightly broader view on it.
That's exactly right, and the numbers that you've quoted are the ones that I've written in the report, in terms of 130 processes that are in the old system that need transferring to the new, and a further 480 that need to be developed as part of that design. And the idea of the design is that everything that we develop will be reusable. You know, if you want to pay for something, it is a standard process to do that, and we can make tweaks around the edges to make it suitable for each of those services. So, as Matty said, it will get quicker. We are approaching this in terms of a series of sprints, in order to make sure that we're attacking the high volume areas first, and then dealing with some of the more complex ones. And that is roadmapped out in terms of what the forward plan looks like over the next 12 months. But as I said, it'll be one of those things, once it's done, it's kind of a continuous improvement cycle at that point, as services change, as they evolve, as tariffs change, etc. So it is an ongoing process, but those original sprints should be finished in the next 12 months.
Thank you. And is the end result of the Power BI usage going to be that we have access to a live update of data that says how far certain services are behind, and in return to in dealing with reported issues throughout the conurbation, such as block drains and lighting issues and that kind of thing?
In terms of the common data platform that we've created, every new clean data set that we get that feeds into that common data platform, then yes, we will then be able to use it to interrogate and create data insights, with the view that then service areas will be able to identify where their issues areas are, because they've got a report of how they're performing, and they can then use that information to streamline the way in which they deliver their services to make them more efficient in the future. So it's one of those, we need to keep gradually building on it and working out those improvement cycles as each service area and as an organisation going forward. But the good thing about data and seeing it visualized, it helps you to understand it, and it helps you to ask better questions, and it helps you to think about what your service delivery needs to look like in the future.
Thank you. That was my point, actually. I think councillors will be able to make and ask better questions related to individual services once we have access to that data. So I think my question from there would be, once that's all live and as it comes through on an individual basis, will we as councillors get access to that live data? And follow-up question, would we then be able to potentially segment it into issues in our own wards?
Everything's possible. Everything's possible, yes.
Anything's possible, Councillor Waters. I'm going to, actually, we've got Councillor Canavan waiting online to speak. Unless it's really pressing, I'd like to draw this to a close now, because we've got two other fairly meaty subjects to discuss this evening. So, Councillor Tarling, is that okay? I'll go to Councillor Canavan online then. Thank you.
My point's been covered, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waters, I cut you off a bit. Are you content? You okay? All right, thank you. Okay, there are a couple of issues that came out of a fairly lengthy debate. A couple of significant points. I think the points that Councillor BC has raised about planning. Now, overviewing scrutiny has actually checked on the progress of the planning development, and there's a planning development board. We've looked at it twice before. It's been quite a long time since we've done that. I think it's probably time for us now to check on progress again. So what I will, and we could discuss it when we look at the forward plan later on, and we will discuss whether it's something that we can bring onto the forward plan to revisit that. Additionally to that, I think you mentioned that we should ask the Transformation Advisory Group to maybe look at the integration of planning with the transformation programme. Which is a quite slightly separate thing. I mean, we've got two distinctly different things here, although they are related. So I think that we will, and I don't think we need to vote on this. I think we can take an action as we are members of that group to get that on the advisory, transformation advisory group meeting agenda, and I think we can do that. Yes, yeah, between us. So I don't.
Can I just interrupt, please?
Yeah.
Just to say that the planning service improvement is an item on the work plan for the Environment and Place Committee. They are monitoring that. That comes under their remit.
Okay, well, that's fine then. That's fine, and we can, we can express our concerns to the chair of that particular committee. That's fine. Good. Do you know when they're actually going to be looking at it?
That committee is going to look at their work plan on Wednesday to formally agree it. I think they were looking at having 6 monthly updates, so certainly keep you good hold on that topic.
Good. Okay. Thank you. All right, then I think we'll draw it to a conclusion. There's been a useful debate, and we really look forward to the customer getting the return on their £50 million investment. Because at the moment we've spent as much as we've saved. I think it's about equal at the moment, and now we're looking to the fate where we can really start getting that return on investment and hopefully improve the efficiency, which our residents can communicate with the council. So let's hope it's all going to work out for us. We're going now to, and then we go back to agenda item, which was agenda item 8. It was a draft corporate strategy delivery plans, and the leader of the council is here to introduce that paper to us. Thank you, leader.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper is the detail around the original corporate strategy, which we put through earlier on in the year, which you'll recall set the new strategy to be people and communities, environment and place. And it's really sort of step 2 in the process, where you've actually got sort of the glossy thing that we can take out and say, this is what BCP is all about. It's quite a shift from the previous one, because this is much more about the people who live here, the communities that are there, and the place that we want to become, rather than being a sort of boom, boom, boom. It's a bit more gentle. What I think we've tried to do with this document is to really give a flavour of, since the birth of BCP 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, that we've taken it. So what have we achieved so far? What is it we're setting out to do? What do we want to be known for? And what do we want our people to judge us by? And the detail around it is looking at all of the measurements that we think, from the strategies that have been developed over the last few years and from the responses to various surveys and engagements with residents, the things that people care about. So there will be items in here that you think, why are we measuring that, or why aren't we measuring something else? What we've had to do is to say, how can we get a flavour across all of the elements that people said were important when we did the corporate strategy review. All of the areas that people told us that were the key areas for them. How do we measure that in one way or another? And then how do we get held to account over the coming months and years? So step 1 was actually agreeing the corporate strategy with our residents, agreeing what those sort of headlines were going to be and what those themes were going to be. Step 2 is about having the document that puts the narrative around it, puts the measures in place, and is able to be picked up and understood. Step 3 will come when we get to the end of the first quarter of this financial year. So that will be in the summer, where we're actually able to say, well, these are the measurements. what is our baseline? Where are we now? What direction are we heading? And where we test with members and with the public about whether we're going fast enough in the right direction, and whether those targets are either stretching enough, too ambitious, or whether they're in the wrong place. So this is step 2 of a 3-step process. I want to thank Gail and her team for the great work she's done. I think she's represented BCP in a really positive way. I've been having to look at the corporate strategy document and plan for another relatively local council to assist somebody in a job application. And when I read it, I thought, oh, is that it? Because I've been reading hours, and I thought, do you know what, actually this really does give you that sense of, you know, getting into the details. So it's really over to you to sort of challenge on it. I'm sure there's going to be bits you pick up and you say, well, why have we missed stuff? And, you know, it is always going to be an iterative process, but we have to sort of at some point pick a set of measurements, lay them down, and then say, now let's judge us forward on that for the coming year. So yeah, so really that's where I want to start with it. Introduction.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. Firstly, can I thank you and Isla and the team for bringing this forward at very short notice. That's much appreciated. And but I thought it was important that, well, we thought it was important that this very important plan came forward for scrutiny, given that it's going to cabinet for the next month, or later this month. Sorry. Yeah. So, members, over to you.
Thank you. It's really great to see this next step, as Vicky said, and get some more detail around our strategy and how we're going to measure that. Because I think you may remember from the last time we talked about the corporate strategy, I wanted to know all about measurements. And my first point is a question, because I note within the document it says that the detail of baseline targets, intervention levels is available. I'd love to know where, because I'd like to be really geeky and get into it really. There might not be a straightforward answer to that question. It might be lots of different places. I understand that, but I'd really keen to know where I can go and find out, drill down further into some of these measures. I had a couple of comments on particular measures, which is, if it's all right, I'm gonna make those comments now.
Would you like that question to be answered first of all about the data?
Yeah, I can do it that way.
Yep,
However
yep.
you like.
Okay. Leaders?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm going to pass to Isla in a sec, but what I was going to say is it's actually probably quite appropriate that the transformation thing came first, because there was, you know, a lot of this is going to be around these dashboards. You know, historically, you would never have been able to find this data. It just was impossible to seek unless you were to ask 27 different officers. We've got the dashboards developing. We've got the ability for residents to start accessing information. But in terms of the baseline, that's what we're going to have at the end of the quarter, because the quarterly performance management report that we bring to Cabinet every quarter, that's where you've got your baseline. So the ones that we're transferring across from the old corporate strategy, you can pick out from that document. Obviously, there are some that we're adding in because they came up as really important for residents. So finding them, extrapolating them is something the team have got to do. And we've given them the deadline of the end of that first quarter to bring that into place. I think trying to get that together prior to that first quarter isn't really a realistic thing to ask them to do, because it's being drawn from different places. But those measures that were in the previous quarterly report, I'd say probably 2/3 of those at least are being transferred over because they're useful. The ones that aren't are the ones that people said, we don't really know why we're actually challenging this stuff, and they've been dropped and replaced. So I'm also looking forward to the day, Councillor Waters, where we are able to, you know, extrapolate whatever we want from various, you know, BI. And there's some really fabulous stuff available out there. I'm just not sure, because we've had so many other fundamental things to do, whether we've been able to develop some of them as much as perhaps other local councils have been able to through their through their use of data. But I don't know if you've got anything to add on.
So on the measures that are in this document, actually just a kind of oversight of all the strategies that we currently have and those that we may be developing. So some measures we may not have in place yet because those strategies have to be written, but a lot of them come from existing strategies. So the team are doing a huge amount of work to pull that into one document, which is 42 pages at the moment, and that is forming a dashboard. And our ambition is that people can then drill into those individual measures, so you can see where that those really key top line ones have been built from. So you can absolutely geek out on that document. We're just in the middle of still pulling it together. That's why I've not shared it quite yet, because there's still a bit of work to do. And I think the other thing I'd emphasise a bit, what the lead said earlier, it is an iterative process. We are going to be reviewing each year this and adding the measures that we need to and tweaking because I think as we have the discussions, we'll understand which things we really want to see and which things really reflect the progress we want to see being done. So we don't want to lock everything in for 4 years. We want to be able to add and tweak as we go along. So we're building in that review yearly as well.
Okay, carry on.
Yes, thank you very much. That's great. And just as a quick follow up, then, do you have an idea when and how we'll be able to see that document that you've just referred to?
So I mean, obviously I'll consult with the leader, but we'd like to show that both on the website, but I think we're going to bring it to Cabinet to have a look at first, and there will be a dashboard, which again we'll need to get agreement, but we would like to publish that so people can go in and drill down as they want to. So we're just developing that at the moment.
Can I just follow up on that? Will that be a publicly available dashboard, or will it be like on the councillor site, or do you know where it'll be located?
I mean, I need to get agreement from Vicky, but our ambition would be that it would be on the website so people can look at it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, anything that this is a public document. Any measures that are on here, we should be either proud of them, or if they're not where we want them to be, we should be open enough to be able to help get people to help us get on the journey to the right place. I think the other thing I just want to add is page 31. I think is a really important document for you, Chair, and for your team, in that these are the strategies that we are going to be developing and working on over the next 2 years. So, although they may not be listed with a date on the Cabinet Forward Plan, when we often get a question of, well, how do we know what's coming up? Here it is. Just turn to page 31, and as your work plan, you can say, well, look, they're working on delivering a new enforcement model to protect our streets and open spaces by March 2025. Actually, this should be almost the Bible of, if it's not on here, it's because there isn't the capacity right now to be able to do it. These are the key things. And if we want to add things to it, then we need to be able to be honest enough to say, where's the capacity going to come from? Are we going to have to drop something else? Because we have a limited capacity within the council, but this should be a guide for people to understand where the priorities of the council will be, and hopefully it's clear enough that we've got anything in green is related to the environment, anything in blue is communities, and then the purple is internal. So yeah, hopefully that will be a good guide for all of the scrutiny committees.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Kate, do you want to carry on? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, if that's okay. So just on that page that you've just referred to, Vicky, I'm sorry, this was going to be my last point, so I think that might be a bit picky. I was a bit confused by some of the dates, because at the top it says 24-25 and 25-26, and then quite a lot of the deadlines in under 25-26 actually fall within 24-25. So because they're March 25, which I think falls within 24-25. So simplest thing might just be to change the headings to 2024 and 2025. Sorry, it's a bit picky, but it can bother me.
Given that you're absolutely right, because that's right, and actually there is an inconsistency between some of them say by the 31st of March 2025 and others say by March 2025. Actually, I think in some respects, it would be better to suggest that it's within that financial year, because it equally I don't want to be held to ransom by somebody saying, well, it was supposed to be by March and it's now April and we've had a crisis in February. And, you know, so I agree with you actually, Kate. And I think given that it's easy enough to make a small change like that, I think we should make those slight changes. So thank you for that suggestion. As I say, okay, Isla, please could you take that on board?
Very happy to do that.
There you go. You don't need to put it as a recommendation. We've accepted that.
Quite not with that. The other things was just a couple of comments on some of the measures, particularly within the environment and place section that I picked up on. One of them is we're wanting to measure an increase in the total number of sustainable passenger trips, and I thought that was interesting because I have a background working in sustainable travel, so this is one of my areas of knowledge, and a target that I would expect to see with sort of best practice would be more around modal shift and a greater percentage, you know, an increase in the percentage of journeys completed by sustainable modes rather than the total number, because what we could end up with there is just as many car trips as there are now and more cycling, walking and public transport trips, which is probably not quite what we're trying to achieve. So that was my comment on that one. And then the other one was within the people and communities, and it was just that there's a measure to reduce the number of homeless households in B&B, and I did wonder if that should be in temporary accommodation, because I know from my own experience working with residents in my own ward that we have lots of residents who are moved out of B&B, but they are still in temporary accommodation and stuck in temporary accommodation for a long time. So that would seem to be more robust to trying to reduce the numbers in temporary accommodation overall.
Yeah, Councillor Slade.
Yeah, so to the first one, I think it's a fair point. I think it's also about how we measure. So we can measure the number of additional feral bike trips. We can measure the number of bus journeys taken. We can measure those things because we have means to do so. I think if we start having to create whole new ways of calculating percentages and shifts, we don't have the capacity in the council to start doing all that data analysis. It just doesn't exist. So if that isn't there, I would be very uncomfortable about making that shift, because actually, you know, there is more than one way to skin a cat. You know, it's not just about modal shift. Obviously, use of EVs is more sustainable. Now, it doesn't affect congestion, but it does affect air quality. And it does affect other things. So I think we have to be really careful that this is not going to be all things to all people. There is also the climate plan. That is completely separate, and you know, is working to much sort of tighter margins. But I would just be really careful about trying to ask things to be creating a monster where we have to get somebody to design a model and collect data that we don't otherwise able to collect, and that will end up with a situation where we can't collect it. The flip of that, of the TA versus B&B, temporary accommodation versus B&B, is this is 2-year plan in terms of the delivery models. Yeah. So in the long term, yes, of course, you want everybody out. So 24 to 28, you'd want to reduce temporary accommodation. But getting people out of temporary accommodation is not something that is easily deliverable by 2028. It's shifting people out of bed and breakfast into the next best, which is temporary accommodation. We then want to get them out of temporary accommodation to permanent accommodation. But when people come into homelessness, there is often going to be a period of time where they're in a temporary space, because you know, somebody gets made homeless tomorrow by their landlord. We're not going to put them into a permanent home. People take a long time on the housing waiting list to find the right property. And I think if we were to commit to getting people out of temporary accommodation, we would actually create another problem for ourselves. We don't have social homes we can put them into. So, you know, bed and breakfast is the worst possible option. Some of the temporary accommodation we have is really good quality, middle term, you know, 1 to 2 year. The stuff we've just built up at Herbert Avenue, it is technically temporary accommodation, but it is longer term temporary accommodation. So I'd be a bit uncomfortable about pushing that too hard at this point, when we still have way too many people in B&B. That should be our goal, is ending the use of B&B and giving people a self-contained family unit, which a lot of the temporary accommodation is. Some of it's shocking, but I want to see that gone. But I think TA as a overall isn't necessarily a dreadful thing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salmon. Sorry, yeah, please, Anna.
To just come in on that as well, again, in the detailed delivery plan, which I appreciate you haven't seen, there is a development of the homeless strategy from 2025. So I think some of that might recognise that longer term look as well. You know, again, that might be something you might want to interrogate as a single piece of work. And I think this corporate strategy is about trying to summarise a huge number of strategies and we've cherry picked some indicative measures. So I think the same with the modal shift for cycling. We need to go back and look at the original strategy, where that's come from, and see is there a different way to measure that might be more appropriate, or in the future when we refresh that strategy, is that something we need to look at? So it's sometimes quite hard to pick out those single measures from quite deep dive strategies, or strategies that are about to be reviewed or even started.
Thank you. Anybody else? I've got a question, or I kind of, you've got some. Okay, well, I will go first. Yeah. All right. On page 24, there's this very colourful chart of how we work. Well, I think it almost replicates the corporate model, operation model, but it's different. Actually, it is a bit different, and I'm just wondering if it's supposed to be representative of the corporate model, or whether it is a different one.
So it started life as that.
Okay.
So if it looks familiar, that's because it is familiar.
Yes.
But it's sort of the next iteration. I'm going to get Graham to explain that, because it looks very Graham, doesn't it?
I'm going to take that as a compliment, because
well,
I didn't say it looks very grey.
I certainly will agree with you that it's very colourful and very pretty. I could say, but I'm not sure I could say that about the chief executive. With all great respect.
I think I should take that and move on, Chubb, but it's a modernised version of the previous operating model, just trying to sort of the next iteration, trying to get it into a simpler model that doesn't require a voiceover to explain it, and it is about building the organisation on our values and then on data and insight, and how that flows through the organisation to deliver personal objectives right the way through to the corporate strategy. That's the intention of it.
I did note one significant change to the model, and that it introduces the corporate priorities right at the top, and it sits above the other things. And I've not seen that before. And I wondered, what's driven that change in the model?
It generally is trying to bring it into a more cohesive model. It's actually the reason that we're here, is to deliver that corporate strategy, to deliver that corporate vision. But also the other intrinsic difference, we've put the values in, as the values underpin everything. So, we have to ensure that we've got integrity, we're passionate about our communities, those values, and really making sure that drives everything we do. So that is the intent of the model. It's to say we're heading towards that vision where people, nature, coast and towns come together in sustainable, safe and healthy communities. If that's what we're driving and that's built on our values, then we should be operating in that way. That's the intention of it.
Thank you, Chief Exec. Yeah, Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, it's just a couple of points. So first of all, I was very pleased to see that you have a measure for increasing the number of completed new affordable and social rented homes. But I have a little bit of a concern that those two things have been lumped in together, because when you create a new affordable houses, that's a one-off thing. They've sold and then they're gone. And sometimes, although they are affordable because they're at a bit of a discount, they are not affordable for quite a lot of people. I do believe that it is that we do need a lot more social rented homes in BCP, and we know that already. So I just think it would be quite good maybe to split those two into two different measures, and that we could actually be increasing both, rather than or at least we could make sure we have a separate measure to say that we must be increasing the number of social rented homes, because that's actually basically increasing our housing stock. So I would like to see that specific. So that's one point. Do you want to answer that one first? Yeah, go ahead.
So that is two separate measures in one line, because otherwise we wouldn't have room for any more. So I think we can add the word and also social rented homes. I think if you add a little word also, we can still fit it onto one line. We had all sorts of fun and games with this document where, for example, on the pages with all the lovely infographics, we were wanting to add extra infographics, but realizing that it would be too busy. So there was a bit of a one in, one out measure. And, you know, if we add any more lines, the whole document won't work. So if we add the word also, hopefully that will allow you to feel that it is both that we need to increase, not merging the two into one. Is that okay? I think that's the best
It makes social rented homes sounds a little bit of an afterthought, and I thought maybe the word both increase both the number of completed new affordable homes and social rented homes is the 4-letter word that you're looking for. Yes.
If we can go with both, increase the number of completed new affordable and social. Are you happy with that, Isla?
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So my next point was I've been looking at this and I've been trying to work out what can we use as a measure to make sure that we're putting people at the heart of what we do, which is what you have on the first page. Because I think that is a really important thing. And I do see that you have got some good measures like increasing satisfaction with the way we run things, increased levels of trust, increased percentage of residents who think we provide value for money. All those things are sort of getting towards it. But I really, first of all, just wondered if there's something we could do to measure. Maybe it's the increased satisfaction with the way we run things. Maybe just to be sure what it is we are going to measure there, whether we're going to have a survey on what sort of thing we're going to ask for, because my main concern with this is really around the fact that since BCP joined together, I don't think the level of service that people get in pool is quite as much as it used to be when we were just pool. And that kind of makes sense because bigger is more difficult at first. I can understand that. But it is particularly difficult when people in pool didn't actually ask to be put together with BCP. And so that does mean as a councillor, I will get people saying, well, why did we do it if it wasn't going to make things better? And I need to have an answer to that question. So it's really what I'm looking for is when are we going to get to that point where people feel that they're getting a better service from BCP than they would be getting if we'd stayed as pool. And it's not about whether they are getting a better service, but it's whether they feel they're getting a better service. And I'd just like to, it may be there isn't different words. The words you've got there may be fine, but it's just what goes behind those words, just giving us some confidence. And actually a bit related to that, one thing I think maybe we could also measure is perhaps we could measure how staff feel, how the staff in the council feel about the service that they're providing, as well as how residents feel, because I do think there's quite a big relationship between how the staff feel about the job they're doing and the service that they can provide. So yeah, maybe if we could just perhaps, I don't know if you can get it in a few words, add something in to say that you're interested in what the staff feel, and yeah, just to bear in mind the things I've said behind what you've got written here, really.
Yeah, leader.
Yeah, so I'm sort of slightly frustrated to hear that, because if you've actually read this document from cover to cover, I think it says that we are absolutely all about people. And I think to suggest that it's not saying that that we're putting people first, I think is a little unfair, because you know you can't help but read this and go, this is all about people, the communities and the places, you know, the ambitions for the place and the measures. I mean, we're asking them if they have good life satisfaction, if they feel safe. We're asking them all sorts of things. Frankly, Sue, Councillor Aikenhead, nobody is going to think this is a great idea because the world has changed, right? You won't find a council in the country where everyone's going, God, isn't it better than it was 5 years ago? Or isn't it better than it was 10 years ago? This country is in collapse. It's in absolute collapse. And I think the fact that we are looking to measure dozens and dozens of really detailed things about all the ways that people were trying to make people's lives better. You know, making sure the percentage of EHCP plans are issued more quickly, increasing the uptake of employment for people with disabilities, increasing the number of children who are attaining well. You know, all of those things. That is your evidence that we are putting people at the heart of this. I don't think a measure that says prove that we're putting people at the heart of things is going to do that. The evidence will be in these numbers collectively showing improvement quarter on quarter, which the public were going to need to see the evidence of. I'll give you an example, Sue. The number of people who say, oh, Bournemouth Town Centre, it's rubbish compared to what it used to be. And then you say to them, when was the last time? Oh, in fact, look at that, an email's just come in. Bournemouth Town Centre. What a surprise. And you say to them, when was the last time you came into town? 4 years ago. Okay. So you have no evidence to back up what you're saying. You're just remembering what life was like before COVID, when we were entering into a new council. Wasn't it all exciting? Didn't it potentially have the greatness? And when we hadn't been through the most awful government that we've had for the last few years, that's just taking things apart. I just think you're right about poor people not wanting to do this, but actually, I don't think we should be talking about Paul or Bournemouth or Christchurch. People across the whole area and across most councils are feeling the pinch. Councils have been stripped of cash, and we're all trying to do our best. And I don't think that it's particularly helpful to try and actually ask people to articulate that in a sentence. Where I do think we can improve is in that section, the purple section, where we do actually look at an increase in employee engagement. So there is a piece there about staff engagement. There is space to add the line about, it's not just about how much they engage, but increase the staff satisfaction rate. I think we can add that line without critical, problems. But I just think at this point, if the measures of the majority of these are going in the right direction, then I think that is in itself the evidence people are being put at the heart. So I don't mean to be critical. I just think the chances of people being happy right now is a lot to ask. Maybe in a year's time they might feel a bit better.
Yeah, I just yes, you did misunderstand me a bit. I didn't in any way mean to say this was not people-centered, was only just looking for a way that we could measure it over the next few years, because people may be at a very low point now, but I hope that maybe they will become happier. And I hope I'm an optimistic sort of person about things getting better. And I would just like to reiterate, I was not making any criticism of this not being people-centered, and I was not making any criticism of your council for making any of the national problems that we have, okay? But only just suggesting that it is a good idea to measure people's satisfaction, even if it's at a low point at the moment. Surely we can still measure that it will increase. And I think the way we run things can have a multitude of things beneath it, and we just need to make sure we're clear about what those things are.
So in the green one, the first one is increase the percentage of residents who are satisfied with their local area as a place to live. So that sort of encapsulates the broadness. And then if you've then got in the purple one, increase the satisfaction in the way we run things. I'm just not sure that if we're any more specific, we're going to go, oh, so what, you want them to have lots of likes on the website? It's like, because I can't stand it when you have the thing that a measure of satisfaction is that we have more Facebook likes. Whoopie-doo. Because actually, I think it's a very shallow way of measuring it. I agree with you. It's difficult to say increase satisfaction with the way we run things. That's for the team to actually establish those measures, and we'll see that through. I'm just not sure that it's as straightforward as as an up rate or a down rate. 'Cause that feels like very.
I think we
Look,
probably
we
thrash that bit together. Could I bring in Isla, please? Thank you.
Perhaps I can make a suggestion where I think you're right. I think trying to measure satisfaction is quite multifaceted, but I think there may be a number of measures within this and probably within delivery plans that we could maybe group together on a dashboard that you can see when those things move. It'll give us a kind of maybe a colour grading as to whether it's going in the right direction as a group. So I think you're right, trying to find a single measure for that's going to be incredibly difficult. I mean, different things to different people. So maybe we can take that away, have a look and suggest what we might group together and go through it with Cabinet as well.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that suggestion. I'd like to bring in Councillor Canavan, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I may have missed it, so apologies if I have, but I just wanted to ask about the recommendations. And it says agree to establishing new governance arrangements for reporting and tracking progress. I wondered if it might be possible to get a bit of a time scale on that, and more precisely where that's going to come back to for us to have a look at as to what those new governance arrangements might look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. That's exactly the question I was going to ask as well.
So I'm just clarifying the timeline is expected to be in line with this into the first quarter. But Isla was just explaining about the way that there's a board, but she might be best to explain that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So we're planning to have a board, an oversight board, to make sure that as officers we're keeping track of performance. Of course, we will feed into Cabinet. I'm sure we'll be keeping track of performance, and the dashboard should allow performance to be tracked more regularly than the previously report, a kind of a full report quarterly. But if we have a live dashboard, people will be able to go in as well. So the governance will be a board that sits over this.
Performance oversight board, is that?
I think it's a corporate strategy oversight board. So making sure that that'll need to include both, because we talked about the reviews earlier. So where we're going to review yearly if we've got the right measures, if we've got the right strategies, if we need to tweak any timelines coming up, but also any measures that are coming up as well.
Councillor Canavan, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Rice, please.
Hello. Sorry, my camera's not working, so I can't turn it on. Just some very brief points. I thought that Councillor Aikenhead was talking about measuring staff happiness as a separate measure, not to do with sort of general population, but specifically if staff are happy, then that's a good sign. So I thought that's what she was talking about, but I may have misunderstood. My points relate to page 31 and 30 of the document, and there's a photograph. So obviously everything in this document is important and has to align with the vision, and we have a photograph of a dual carriageway with a roundabout over the top, with no cycle infrastructure and no walking infrastructure, and no buses on it. So I just thought that was an odd photograph to have there, and not in keeping with the vision. And then on page 34, we also have maybe a third of the picture taken up with a dual carriageway. It looks lovely and empty, but I just feel that if you're looking for extra space, then maybe something else could be put there. Thank you. That was it.
Thank you for your comments. They are noted.
Okay, those comments are noted. Thank you, Councillor Rice. Okay, members, I think. Oh yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Beasley, sorry. You always talk at the last minute.
Thank you, Chairman. You're consistent because you did that on the last item as well. I just wanted to raise a couple of points, if I may. As you may imagine, I've been involved in quite a few corporate strategies over the years. So I know their strengths and I perhaps know some of their weaknesses. And I was very pleased to hear that there will be some sort of oversight review, because the corporate strategy is only as good as what it actually delivers. If it's just a lot of fine words, because that's what we want to happen regardless of the circumstances, it means nothing at all, to be honest. If there is a proper, robust oversight to it, and I take it that's an officer oversight board, it requires within it, for anybody to trust its integrity, it requires within it a very considerable amount of challenge. Because I've sat around these sorts of meetings in the past, and actually you end up with groupthink. You get to a point where a senior officer has made a statement into which everybody else falls into line. And before you know it, actually, we're just patting ourselves on the back. And that must not be allowed to happen, Chairman. So I do hope that periodically that will come back to this board. Otherwise, today's conversation is going to be worthless. If it does come back, it needs to be demonstrated very clearly that degree of challenge is robust, is meaningful, and has led to change. Because not everything, in my experience, gets done right in the first instance, and sometimes takes much more refinement than you may at first sight think it should. So that was my first point, Chairman. Shall we deal with that one first, and I'll come back with the other?
Leader, I think you were.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think we've had some really good challenge on the corporate performance throughout the time of this council, from from each administration, both through scrutiny and also through cabinet really debating some of the issues that we've seen within the corporate performance. I think the important thing is going to be how this sits along. So almost where we get to the end of the first quarter of 24-25, that we have this document and we have the corporate performance report, and we actually go, actually, are they talking to each other? Because if they're not, if they're incongruent, then the whole thing's been a waste of time. And actually, are we able to respond to your challenge? And we'll only be able to do that if we've been challenging the officers to do so. So I think that that's a completely valid point, but I'm fairly confident that certainly in the time that I've been challenging officers, when I've been not satisfied with the measures they're not the right measures, they're not pushed hard enough, that I'm able to push that. But I would expect us to be pushed by you. So I see there's a risk, but I don't see there's any evidence that we haven't done that successfully when we have actually changed things up a little bit. But I think in terms of how we can challenge the officers before it gets to us, that's the bit that I'm interested in, because this governance board is an officer board. So I'm interested to know how, as portfolio holders, we're able to really challenge at an early stage, so that so that we so it's as robust as it can be.
Before you come on to your next point, Councillor Beasley, could I just ask Lindsay, to come in? She wants to. Sorry, I'm having trouble with names tonight.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. I did just want to come in and tie this into your scrutiny work, because you've done a lot of work planning work in the last few months, and you've talked about proactive scrutiny and reactive scrutiny, and this document and the dashboard that's going to come out of it to measure it tie in and are really helpful with that. So as the leader was saying, page 31, the forthcoming strategies, as an action coming out of this item today, I would suggest that members have a good look at that and feedback views through the chair of any proactive areas that you would like to get involved in, and we can then start those informal discussions to see where you could add value to support those developing areas. You've got room on your work plan for proactive scrutiny. So sort of moving this one step forward to actually link through to the work that you do, we then need your views on how you might want to direct it with that resident lens in mind. And in terms of reactive scrutiny, you'll recall that we've talked about you doing horizon scanning informally outside of meetings, keeping an eye on a key set of documents. The dashboard that comes out to measure this will be one of those key documents. And I would suggest that one of your really important roles as a committee is clearly holding the executive to account, and that is how you can do that. So you can be monitoring through that, and then if there are any areas where you think there are concerns, as you monitor that, that's when you can raise issues in, and those form the reactive scrutiny. So you can really add some value, I think, to the work of the organisation in that way, and it's really good to tie all those things together and think them very clearly.
Thank you, Lindsay. Before I bring you in, Councillor Darling, Councillor Beasley hasn't yet finished, so thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So without getting into too much detail at this board meeting this evening, there are some other issues which I would like to take up outside of this meeting. Also because I don't want them to overtly become politicised. And I go out of my way to prevent that happening over a number of issues, as you will know. But the ones that I would like to, and it may be for the Chief Executive to take this away and think about how that can best be addressed, is, let me look at three in particular. The first one was around housing and the comments that were made earlier about the different categories that we have appropriated within this document. It's always a difficult area. It is one that in the former Bournemouth Council, actually, we managed to eradicate bed and breakfast at one stage. So I understand it really well. And I know what we had to do, which was quite a lot of risk involved for the council, but actually it was successful. But I think that whole housing piece, particularly where the council has direct input through Seascape, as an example, it's very difficult for me now as a member to understand what's going on in those areas in any kind of day-to-day detail. In fact, it would be impossible to. However, I think that there is a lot of stuff in there that I would like to better understand. So I think it's important that there is a mechanism whereby one can do that. And we put a lot of money into some of those projects and some of those acquisitions to actually get the outcomes that the Vice Chairman was talking about a moment ago. That's one. A second one, again, without wanting to expand very much this evening, is actually around town centres, most particularly Bournemouth Town Centre, and how that is going to be dealt with through ambitions in this document. It isn't all about funding. Believe me, I do know, and I know it is not all about funding. A large part of it is, but it isn't exclusively. So that's the second one. And the third one is around one of our big employment sectors, which is tourism. And it says in the document that we get 10 million visitors annually, spending over £581 million with 12,000 tourism jobs. So it's a chunky piece of our local economy. And I also see amongst the 4 bullet points raised in the Chief Executive's piece in this document, that we will work with partners to make the most of all our strengths. All our strengths includes the council, presumably. And yet I see more and more of that responsibility being put back onto volunteers who give their own time supporting the industry, but the frustrations that they are subject to in terms of being able to get to the finishing line, principally because of the council. It's a bit like the old story of the old adage, rather, of I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. And that sort of ethos doesn't always work through in practice. And I'd like to see a way of trying to facilitate some bridge building there, which I think will have outcomes that are positive, not just for the council, but for the industry in this area and for employment. And I think if that and some of the other issues I've raised could be thought about, they don't need to be answered this evening, but I do believe that I've got some valuable input that might be helpful there, most particularly on that third one in terms of how we actually make the difference and we achieve some of the stuff that's in here, in this document, rather than it being just focused on the council in terms of that part of it, because the thriving economy bit matters increasingly to all of us. And if we think of it as being something perhaps slightly outside the council, we'll set ourselves up to fail.
Oh, how long have we got? I'm going to ask, bearing in mind what Councillor Beasley has said about not wishing to go into all the detail, just think about art as we go along, and probably how we can encompass some of this within our future work plan as well, and also whether there's any desire to put some of those thoughts into this. You may well say they're already there, leader, but maybe I could just ask you for a response to Councillor Beasley's comments.
Well, I'm afraid I missed the middle one because I was just clarifying something, so I might have to ask again. But in terms of housing, I think we've already made clear, and I think it's already been raised with, I don't know if it's this scrutiny board or a different one. There is a big housing strategy coming forward over the summer. I think we've actually asked for a big member workshop to make sure that it's done in a really detailed way. So, housing is a massive piece of work which people across the spectrum are really interested in. So, I think we're in danger of this document being everything, and it's not. Tourism is a sector, it's an important sector, but we aren't listing every sector, and this isn't the document that's going to answer everyone's problems. So housing, yes, of course, housing is important. We are doing a new strategy. In terms of Seascape, their business plans are available. There is your ward colleague, in fact, Councillor Beasley, is on the board of Seascape, so I'm sure he can update you on the work that they're doing, and the governance of the external companies is being deliberately reviewed so that it is more transparent, that it is more open to people, and we are clarifying and checking whether they are the right ways of actually delivering what we want. Because there has been some criticism about whether we need these companies functioning in these ways. So that piece of work, you'll remember, I think came to scrutiny in January, where we started the process of that governance review. That governance review is being, I think the first one's come back to Cabinet, I think in June, if not July, but they're imminent. And of course, all of the business plans and board information is fully available to members. So Seascape is doing some great stuff, and yeah, it's available. I'm afraid I missed the middle one, John. What was the middle question? The middle point?
It was about town centres in general and Bournemouth in particular.
Well, I think we've done again. This is a document that's not about that. I mean, goodness me, how much have we done on Bournemouth Town Centre? We've done the summer survey last year. We've done the summit. We are working very, very hard to progress. Connor Burns can give you every in and out of everything that's been going on. We've got the town team. We've launched so much to do with the town centre. I mean, if you want to do a deep dive on it, you are more than welcome, because I can talk to you for hours and hours and hours about the town centre work that's going on, because it's massive. And I think, if there's a suggestion that we're not doing enough, that would be hugely unfair. Because the evidence is there every single week in the work that we are doing, and the work that our town centre staff, particularly led by Sophie Sajic, is just incredible, the work that they're doing. So, by all means, use your scrutiny powers to ask for deep dives on all of these. But I really don't think that this document, the delivery plans for this, it is the means for asking for a detailed strategy on these things. I think those strategies are those individual strategies.
Chairman, that wasn't, I prefaced what I said with that caveat, actually. So I'm in exactly that position, and it was really about trying to take up some of these issues so that we end up with results that will enhance the utility of this document, taken up outside, without them becoming politicised and without actually them taking up too much time in this board meeting. And that was the reason for doing. That was the reason for saying that. I'm not sure what I've done to amuse the leader of the council, but that is not my intention. And I've never tried to get the politics into this, as you well know.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Beasley.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back and just explain? I'm completely bemused. Completely bemused. I'm not amused. I am bemused, because I think it's completely outrageous to raise three massive issues that we are all grappling with and working really hard collectively to deliver positive outcomes on: housing, tourism and town centres, and then say, oh, no, I don't want to discuss it here because it'll be politicised. I'm not politicising anything. I am trying to explain what the council is doing, and to suggest that it should be taken offline with the chief executive behind closed doors. That is not a transparent council. A transparent council is with the greatest respect, Chair, welcoming you doing a scrutiny on each of those individual things and setting up task and finish groups so we all work together on it. That's what we're trying to achieve. But suggesting that I shouldn't be involved with it and have a quiet, cosy chat with the chief exec outside of the meeting, that is politicising it. I'm not politicising.
Leader, I think you can misinterpret it, frankly.
That's willful misinterpretation.
Yeah, I think you have misinterpreted that.
I hadn't risen to the challenge earlier on of blaming the government for stuff and some of the other fruity language that came with that. I would not do that in the board meeting. And if that's willful misinterpretation of trying to do the right thing is now being construed in the public domain as trying to do some cosy deal with the chief executive outside of this board meeting, that was never what I was suggesting or intending. It's quite wrong for the leader of our council to be suggesting that. I suggest, Chairman, you close this down now. I've wasted my time.
Okay, Councillor Beasley, can just hold it there now, please. I am going to close this down, but I think what Councillor Beasley, there was no intent actually, and I didn't think he did suggest that you were going to go away and talk about this issue privately with the chief exec. I think he just wanted to raise these issues because people are concerned about these issues, and he wanted us to find a way of maybe discussing it in the future. And if that related to this particular document, and so be it at some point. But I don't think that was the intent. I think this is more about overview and scrutiny and what areas Councillor Beasley wishes for us to look at in the future. And I think it's fair enough that, it's some of the issues that he's raised are of genuine concern to residents, and where they are, we should be scrutinising them. And actually, all of those items, I agree entirely with Councillor Beasley. These are issues that are a real concern to residents, and we do need to look at them. And I just touch on housing, for example. We are aware there's a housing strategy policy coming through in the near future, but I and the chair of the Place and Environment have been talking at length about housing, and in particular social housing, or the lack of social housing, and the intent of the council to move that area forward, which has been sort of stagnated, not just this administration, for years. I mean, we're doing probably more now than we have for quite some time, but nevertheless, the social register remains high, and people don't see any hope of being able to get into social housing. And the problems that emanate from that situation are dreadful, and we really need to focus on. What we have decided actually is to bring forward a suggestion to our work to have an inquiry day where all overview and scrutiny committees will be involved, because it is an environment-led topic. But of course, there's the financial aspects of it too. There's also the health and well-being aspects, as well as the significant impact on children. So we believe that all of these things need to be brought forward, and a focus put on, what our intent is to do with social housing. And we will be having, I hope, if it's agreed, an inquiry day to focus just on that one particular issue. So I think we probably need to draw this to a close. We've got another very important thing now. Have I missed anybody? Councillor Tarling, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Before I come on to my point, I take what Councillor Beasley said. Yeah, in sincerity, he meant it, and I think he alluded to. I know you're drawing on a line under it, but you did carry on a bit. The former, reflecting on what happened under the former borough, I think is a good point. I hope that Councillor Beasley continues to engage with the various different things that the leaders mentioned, like the big member workshop that we're going to have, and would get involved in that and put some more information on some of the things you've alluded to in the point you've just made. So I'd encourage you, please do carry on and give your experience to the administration with that. My point was actually very separate. Sorry for my indulgence there, but was just regarding, as you know, I've moved off as a permanent member of this committee and moved on to audit and governance, and there's been talk about governance of the corporate strategy, whether that is something that should be moved into the audit and governance field, looking into that. So that the future governance of the corporate plan, whether that was something that we would move into the A&G committee's purview. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. I suggest you discuss that with the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee and see what his view on that is. So, members, I think we've probably thrashed this one to death, and I think we're going to draw this discussion to a close now. I think I'm going to suggest that I just want to go back to the recommendations on the paper to see if we're content with it all, because we are supposed to be looking at the my computer's frozen.
We did suggest.
Yeah, but I just want to. Well, it's recommended the cabinet approve the delivery plan. That was one. Agree the measures for monitoring progress and ensuring accountability for delivery. And the last one was agreeing to establish the new governance arrangements. Has anybody got any issues with those recommendations? Do we agree with them? No one has suggested otherwise. I suggest that we note them, and I would propose that we recommend to cabinet that these recommendations are accepted. Second.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We have a seconder.
Second.
Committee, do we have consent on that? Anybody? Any dissent? No. Okay. All right. We'll do that then. Thank you. So, members, should we have 5 minutes comfort break? And we'll come back at 4 minutes past 8. Thank you. It will take a minute. Okay, thank you, members. Well, now we come to agenda item 10, which is the BCP Regeneration update. Now, it's been, believe it or not, I think about 9 months since the decision to close Future Places was taken. And so that's quite a long time now. When Future Places was running, there was an all-party oversight committee, but we don't have an equivalent thing for, I think, for the new Regeneration organisation. So we thought it would be useful to have an update on what's been going on regarding Regeneration over that period. Now the team have had a chance to settle in and they've started working, and we just thought it would be useful just to touch base with this particular area because it's such a vital area for us. And so we've requested this report specifically for the committee, and very useful it is too. I think you'll find that it's an interesting update. So without saying more, I'll ask the leader whose portfolio this is to introduce this paper. Thank you, leader.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So just a very brief introduction. Obviously, I've got Councillor Howell with me as well as lead member for the Regen projects. Basically, as you've said, the Future Places was closed down as an operation at the end of October, but the company closed down is in its final throes. So we've had about 6 months of this team being internalised, and as you can see from the paper, we offered roles to everybody who was within the organisation. Some of them are still with the organisation, and the key people, including Rob, who's now interim director for the investment and development director. So we've got 3 core projects which it was agreed we would be prioritising, partly because they are sites which are council sites, and partly because they're sites that we know that we've got a really good opportunity to deliver them, and we've got really good project managers who are able to pick them up and run with them. Prior to calling this into scrutiny, we had a meeting with officers and with the new, we're calling them the Investment Advisory Panel, which is the non-executive directors that were involved with Future Places to just be a sounding board for us about how these projects progress. And we did agree, going back in that meeting that we had about a month ago, that we would be wanting to bring forward every 6 months an update on the regeneration projects to Cabinet, so that it's really important that the public as well as members know what's going on, because we're very conscious that some of these projects look like there's nothing going on when there is often a lot happening. And you know, the sort of chat in the pub is, oh, I wonder if they're ever going to build that thing. So by actually scheduling it in as a 6 monthly update, we hope that we'll be able to offer not only that assurance to members and to the public, but also that challenge to officers to say, well, every 6 months there must be something to say, even if that something is actually we've pulled resource from one project to another. So what we've got here are the 3 key projects: Holes Bay, which you know about, which is, I'm not going to go through all the details, but you can see that although there's nothing coming out of the ground, there's an awful lot of stuff that's been going on in terms of getting this ready for some sort of development. The big project, which is the Bournemouth International Centre, the question of do we swap the sites of the Winter Gardens and the Bournemouth International Centre, that has been causing a bit of a delay. While originally we were going to build out the Winter Gardens and separately redevelop the Bournemouth International Centre, then there was a proposal, well, maybe we should move the BIC onto the Winter Gardens site and then redevelop the other side. That meant everything went back to square one. We took a sort of principal view a few months ago that actually that just wasn't practical. It wasn't, there wasn't the money to be able to do something of that scale, and we need to start to deliver, which you can see from this report. The sort of decision to decouple it and move on is allowing us to move the two at a different pace rather than having to work on together. With this particular scheme, as you know, the Winter Gardens has got Muse Developments through the Bournemouth Development Company have the option on this site, so we're having to work at their pace at the moment. And the Bournemouth International Centre have BH Live operating it, and they've got ideas about how they might like to develop it. So we need to move forward with what are our options in terms of, do we want to work on a refurbishment with BH Live, or is there a more ambitious project to come? It will be 40 years since the BIC opened in September, and my hope is that we are able, at the time of its 40th anniversary, to be able to give some level of public update around the direction of travel. So I think as it reaches its middle age, it's time to decide whether it needs a middle-aged facelift or whether it needs to be chopped in for a younger model. So you know, that decision needs to be taken in the next few months, and hopefully the update there is useful. The third one, which we could talk a bit more about, is the Dolphin Leisure Centre. As you'll know, the Leisure Centre in Poole, the Poole Leisure Centre closed many years ago, but the Dolphin swimming pool with its associated gyms and gym and other facilities is even more elderly and is coming to the end of its life. So a lot of work has been done there about how we look to build a new centre within the site, but on a different part of the site, and use housing on the part of the car park to be able to fund that regeneration. The reality is we can't just build a leisure centre with money in the bank. The only way we're going to be able to build a new leisure centre for Poole is to cross-fund it with property development. It's just the way of the world, and this paper sort of takes us through exactly where we are with that process. Rob can talk to the detail, and Mark as well. And the final section just talks about the team itself, and a bit of a progress update on how much money has been committed to this development. To this development team. The Investment and Development Directorate that was born out of Future Places, we have recruited to a new director who she's starting in June. 1st of July. So Rob is ably looking after it at the moment. It doesn't just look at the regeneration, it also looks at housing delivery and smart places. So Rob is working in both roles at the moment as the interim director, but also leading on the BIC project as well. So Mark, do you want to go into any more details? It's best to
I think it's best
get some sort of questions really, because we'll probably be able to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So members. Oh my goodness, I thought we were going to be inundated. Yeah, okay, Claire, thank you.
I have a few. Do you want me to go through it site by site?
I leave it entirely up to you, Claire.
Okay, well, I'll start with my first one, which is about the Holes Bay site, because when I read about this leaving the switching site in situ, and I'm not familiar with this at all. I mean, I've come to this as a substitute member. I don't know what the background of this is, but is that a normal thing to do? Can you hear the noise from these things? I mean, I'm somebody who goes and unplugs the fridge when I check into a hotel room, so I realise that not everybody is like that and is as bothered by noises as I am. But I would find it really irritating if there was any sort of a hum. And are we, you know, is that going to affect the saleability of these properties? Are we likely to have any issue from environmental health? Is this being looked at?
If I just give you a sort of initial thought that you're sorry, Chair.
That's quite all right, Leader. You carry on. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. I was too keen, wasn't I? So the first thing I would say is there are thousands of people who live nearish to pylons, and I don't know that I could do it either, but people do, don't they? And it is sometimes reflected in house prices. But I think the one thing I would say to you is that this site has had a lot of interest. You know, developers, house builders, organisations that do urban regeneration are really interested in this site. You might have seen some pictures. Mark and myself and Emily went up to Battersea Power Station a couple of weeks ago to talk to the developers who made that happen, just to understand how you take a seriously contaminated site and do something special with it. I'm up in Leeds next week at the UK Reef, which is a sort of development conference that most of the councils go to, and there's a lot of panels and discussions all about how to do this sort of urban regeneration. So there will be people who won't want to live there, but there are equally people who don't want to live in, you know, suburbia, or don't want to live near a river, and it's personal preference, and the viability of the site will take into account all of those environmental factors. The bigger environmental factor is the contamination on the land itself, from where the power station was. And that is the main reason for why this is taking so long, because we have to make sure that we remediate the site to make it safe. There is a visioning workshop happening tomorrow, which I'm sure Mark will fill you in on, but I don't think at the moment we're not getting warning signs from developers and organisations saying that they're not comfortable with it. We could remove the switching site, but that would be so expensive that actually it's already really difficult to make the site viable. The advice that we've had so far from the people we have spoken to is that at this point, we can make the site more and more viable by developing parts of the site that then may get the buzz and increase the land value of the other parts of the site, that may in future make it viable to remove it completely or to create it into a smaller physical building. But at this point in time, developing it out in stages is the most viable way of moving it forward. Mark, did you want to add?
Yeah, perhaps we shouldn't use the phrase "get the buzz," yeah, I mean, the history of the site, basic one, goes back 10 years or more. The Poole Council was thinking of ways of how we might be able to finance that, the removal of the site, or basically it's not needed in anywhere near the same specification as is there at the moment. It could be made much smaller, but we were at the time, I think it was quoted £20 million the cost of doing that. The only solution anybody really came up with for that was to build a supermarket next door to it, which would fund it. You know, we're in completely different worlds, and supermarkets not being, you know, supermarkets don't want to build large stores anymore. We're not in that world. There are things that you can do potentially to screen it. We are considering whether we leave the land that is immediately adjacent to it to later development, possibly using it for meanwhile use. But as the leader said, there's no indications that it's going to impact really on the broader development of the site. And to a certain extent, there's probably a bit of game of chicken or who moves first, because, you know, if the actual facility falls over before, you know, we put pressure on the operator to do anything, then that's their problem. It's not our problem, and, you know, it may work its way out hopefully further down the line.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. Do you want to set your next questions together, and then if it requires a response from, they can do it all together, just to cut down on the time? Thank you.
Yes, I'm wondering which one to sort of ditch, but okay, I'll go with Bick and Winter Gardens, and I think your introduction did help, but just maybe just give like a layperson's perspective into your rationale, because when I'm reading sort of page 41 of the report, it just, to an idiot reader, it just initially seems to be a bit of a contradiction that we're sort of decoupling the Bick and the Winter Gardens sites to make it more of an achievable development. But then later on the same page, we're talking about packaging up the BIC with other sites in BCP, as if to make it more attractive for a more ambitious development. So it's like, what are we doing? Are we going smaller scale or going more ambitious? And if we are going ambitious, why not keep the two sites coupled? I don't get it, and I'm sure that's my ignorance, but I thought I'd give you the opportunity to explain it.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead with that initially. Basically, one of the big things that we've tried to do in terms of across the whole piece here and the shift from future places to the council is to simplify what we're doing and really focus on key projects so that we can improve the deliverability, we can give more focus to officers, and we can spend money more efficiently. Now, one of what we've decided here in terms of the BIC is to go for two options set out briefly in the paper. One is in relation, it is a kind of minimum option, or an option that essentially improves the existing facility as the current operator would like it to be improved, and we can work with them to develop a potential plan that is investable. And the second option is to put together a more ambitious potential plan that we could sell to an external investor. And we need that investment, external investment, to do anything large scale really on any of the projects. And that's one of the key things that we need to move forward to develop a structure and how to readily access those forms of investment. But initially what we need to do is to put together a package that we can see that would both be broadly acceptable to the residents, population locally, but also investable, attractive to outside investors. And a lot of it will be about we need to give confidence to both those group of stakeholders, and therefore then some work needs to go on to position and create an envelope from which we can talk to investors, and that's really the position we're in at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah.
Can I just take it back a step, possibly because Claire and some others
Councillor Howe, can you turn your mic off, please?
Sorry.
weren't involved with the council previously, is that if we roll back pre BCP, when it was Bournemouth Council, the Winter Garden site as a site on its own was due to be developed, and there were issues with its viability, and the part of the reason for the viability problem was the requirement in the local plan to redeliver multi-storey car park, and to deliver 4,000 square feet of was it meters, one or the other, I don't know the difference, meters, 4,000 square meters, like it's a lot more than 4,000 square feet, isn't it, of leisure. And of course BH2 then came, so actually would we have a re-provision of leisure, but the requirement to do those two things were making that site not viable. And that's sort of when the idea came up a few years ago. Well, what if we were to use that big empty bowl of a site and put the BIC there, and then we could develop something that was potentially had higher values on the other site? And I think it was that decision, that the decision to do that instead was sort of then put everybody to, okay, so those original plans, we're junking them and we're swapping. Completely legitimate idea, and I think a lot of us thought it was a really great idea. It wasn't our idea, it was the administration in between, but actually I quite like the idea. But actually looking at the numbers, that we just decided no, that isn't going to work because of the scale and size of what we want to deliver. And the decision to decouple the swap is the bit that has allowed this twin track approach on the Winter Garden site. Sorry, the twin track approach on the BIC site, and then just say Winter Gardens, just develop it. The car parking study that we've been waiting for the evidence on over time is potentially going to allow us to deal with that viability gap that we had, because of the way that the car parking study is delivering that well, where do we need our car parking? Do we need to deliver every car parking replacement on the site, or can it be delivered elsewhere? And that's just allowed us to lift up a little bit and do a bit more. So yeah, it does sound like a contradiction, decouple, but they have two options. But it's only right with the BIC itself that we do not only look at the ambitious option, but also look to BH Live and say, well, what do you want to do? They are, after all, the operator with quite a few years to run on their contract.
Which reminds me, Leader, thank you. I should declare an interest as a director of BH Live and BH Live Enterprises Limited. Thank you. Claire, was there anything else?
I do. Sorry if I'm dominating.
We'll let you have one more.
All right.
Thank you.
So this is about the Dolphin Leisure Centre and what the replacement leisure centre is going to look like. At the moment, you know, I can understand, you know, the high running costs because it's quite unique with being, well, it was shortened, but it was a very sort of long swimming pool. It also has the baby pool, which is great for if you're taking, you know, family, kids of different ages. And also the diving pool. I had a quick look, and I think the next nearby facilities are sort of Southampton, Fair, you know, it's, yeah, it'd be a shame to sort of see that go. Are we planning to retain those features? And also, I think the centre is struggling because, you know, not too long ago it used to cost £1 to park there, and now it's £2.40 because we've got this minimum 2 hours. People are saying to me that they are parking in Pool Park instead, and this is, you know, sort of seems crazy given that we're trying to reduce traffic through Pool Park. So I think we really need to soon, you know, sort out parking with your leisure centre entry. I know we need some consistency, was mentioned when I brought this up previously, but I would compare it with the Two Rivers Meet Leisure Centre in Christchurch, where it was only £1.30 for 2 hours. So I'd want Pool to be competitive with that. Yeah, no, and I think the other point I just wrote down here quickly was about the 5p bag charge. Do you remember that, and how sometimes it is really, really trivial costs? You know, £2.40 might not seem like a lot of money, but sometimes only a small amount of money will significantly change people's behaviour. And, you know, it'd be lovely to see that site used more, because I do think that it could be used more when you compare it to, say, Rossmore, which seems always just too busy, and certainly the access rate of Rossmore seems too busy. It'd be great if we can get more people into Pool as it is at the moment, swimming pool as it is at the moment, and then with the replacement leisure centre as well. I'd like to see parking sort of part of your package for your leisure centre entry.
Thank you. I'm not sure there was a question there, was there?
It has.
Was there a question there?
Oh, I'm happy to talk around it if you wish.
Yeah, if you please carry on.
Yeah, I mean, I as members who've been you know, on the council, previous council, Pool Council for a long time, will know that I'm very keen on councillor involvement. And on this one, I have been trying to get a briefing organised for councillors for some time, but I want it to happen at the right time, because what I don't want to do is to go too early and then not be enough information for councillors to really contribute effectively. What I propose to do is to have a briefing for ward councillors and all councillors in neighbouring wards. And what we're waiting for, essentially what we've done is we've identified put some potential blocks down for where housing would go, what the size of the leisure centre might be, and we're going to a cost consultant to try and understand the relative cost of the scheme and to what degree it's underwater. And, you know, it's only once you know the gap financially that I think we can have sensible discussions about, you know, the facilities on site. There is draft specification which we will show to councillors. Currently, it doesn't include a diving pool, but you know, I very much want to have an open discussion with councillors where councillors can raise issues about the specification and the design, but in the context of understanding that in all probability that the council is going to have to contribute some additional capital into this project, and that therefore all councillors will have to be persuaded of the need to do that. In terms of parking, the leader's made it clear that she doesn't want the parking reduced, that we should have the same amount of parking on site. In terms of the cost of parking structure, I think that's a bit out of my area of responsibility. So,
Sorry to interrupt. I just have been reminded that I should declare an interest as a member with everyone active.
Well, if that's interest, I that's my interest.
Anyone else go to the gym? I don't either, Cameron. It's all right.
I see your light is on, Leader.
Can I just respond on that question of the parking? We are absolutely aware of this issue. When the parking harmonisation came in last year, there was an expectation that it was going to harmonise, and we've identified some anomalies where things haven't harmonised. So I raised this, myself and Andy Hadley raised it with Graham and Amanda a few weeks ago, and we are working on a plan. So we are very, very aware of the problem and trying to find a solution.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask probably Councillor Howell some questions over the project update for the Bournemouth International Centre and the Winter Gardens. You would imagine I'd be probably personally more interested in those because I've been with them both for a very, very long time. And incidentally, it was Alderman Michael Filer who opened the BIC 40 years ago. So might like to be invited to something in his retirement. My questions really are around the process, because it's clear that the decoupling decision has been taken, and I won't comment on that. But the process for going forward in terms of the issues which have got to be addressed and concluded about any kind of redesign, they're bullet pointed at paragraph 29 in the paper. And how that process is going to be undertaken, who's going to make the decision within council and the cabinet process, the governance around those issues, because some of them are going to be stretching the normal situation with regard to planning, it seems to me, because a lot is being asked for in there which isn't necessarily compatible with any other developments within the town centre. So how is the governance going to work around that? And I suppose of interest to most people, particularly members of the public, our local residents, will be, what's your envisaged timescale?
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. Yes, I mean, in terms of the Winter Gardens, it's important to say that because that's a BDC project, that's run slightly differently. I am actually one of the board members, the council representatives on the BDC board. So I kind of have some degree of oversight because over that project from my Regeneration, league member role, because it was wrapped up in big, but now it's decoupled. I guess that I really primarily involved in that as a board member, and there's it's probably still to be established about how the information sharing protocols and what I could properly say in that situation. But in general, it is. You're in the situation, as the leader mentioned earlier, where we've got to work with Muse to move this forward in the best way. I'm not unaware whether you were once on the board of BDC or not. So.
No, I set up BDC.
Yeah, you set it up. So you'd be very much aware then that the development work is undertaken by the development partner, and we be feeding in various elements to that. And one of the key thing that we've had to work on recently is the parking study, because that has been the big blockage in terms of viability. We're much closer now to, we've received the initial data, and we're much closer to getting some certainty as to that. In terms of how it's working with planning, my understanding is that the new head of planning is very keen to, make it clear that the planning service operates as a distinct entity, as it should do, with appropriate Chinese walls, etc. So we will have to act as we should do, as an independent body essentially that's applying for planning permission. But because of the existing precedent of an application that's been passed on that site, we expect to be able to get planning in the same region envelope as was passed before. There will be less need for commercial, and I think it's widely accepted, certainly outside the planning department, that there was too much commercial development in that area. It's required in the first planning application because of the cinema across the road and all the associated restaurants that were built. So we need to move through that. But I think that we are moving forward. And I've got I think that we will follow the BDC process, and I very much hope that these blockages are close to being resolved, and we will move forward with that project, because that will kickstart the relationship and the BDC relationship, and hopefully lead to further developments on other sites. In terms of the BIC, I think that we are at very early days in terms of this. This is being managed by Rob, but Rob has been fulfilling an interim role in terms of management of the wider team, and the team is under a lot of stress at the moment because it's very small, and they really need to recruit some more representatives, some more team members, but because of the pay and review or reorganization that's happening, apparently we can't recruit until that has happened. I'm not particularly happy with that personally. I think that we need to get people on board as soon as possible to strengthen the team. But in terms of actually how we will manage it going forward, Rob will be leading it. We'll work on particularly this broader option. We will need to establish a process where we will engage councillors in that, but it is extremely early days. We've just only really determined that we have these this twin track approach, and so hopefully in 6 months' time I'll be able to give you much more information.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Beasley.
Well, it was about the timescale, which was the third point I raised, and I think I appreciate knowing when we'll be able to be told that, if we can't be told it tonight, right? So timescale deferred until such time as it's known. It'd be handy to know what the sort of parameters of that are, because the paper is obviously relatively live. It's only one page devoted to these two development sites, and I'm just trying to pick out some tangible evidence, really, which is going to help us to progress and to understand when it's going to progress.
Yeah, I'll let Rob make a comment, but I would just re-emphasise that it is very early days, and that we want to really push forward with this, because it's absolutely critical, not just on this project but on all the three major projects, that we understand and develop a strategy for securing investment,
because that's all these projects require this investment, and that I see as the most important thing that we've got to address at the moment.
Rob, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It might help if I just add a few comments around the time frame for councillors. So with regards to the BIC, you'll be aware, many of you will be aware that BH Live have an operating lease on that facility until 2035, and so any renovations that would take place, if that's the route chosen by the council, would need to take place within that time frame. If BH Live are invited to co-invest in those renovations, for example, then no doubt they will request an extension to that operating lease, and that's for the council to decide when it gets to the appropriate point. And so at the moment, one track of the twin track approach is inviting BH Live, with whom we're having ongoing discussions, to assess the level of investment that they think is required in order to maintain competitive in the market versus something more aspirational that would take them to a different level, and that would be both internal and external to the building. So we've asked BH Live, as the current operator is doing a very good job of operating that facility, to come forward with some proposals this year as to how they might like to see that go forward. The second element of the twin track is more complex. The reason for the decoupling from Winter Gardens Councillor Slade has outlined, whilst the two sites were being considered in tandem, it meant that development on Winter Gardens couldn't be brought forward more quickly by Muse, BDC. Now that's complication has been rectified. BDC can concentrate effort on a new Winter Garden scheme, subject to the clarifications that have been requested and outlined in the paper. But with the other option within the twin track, which is the more ambitious proposal, in the event where the council opts to take a more aspirational, transformational approach to the Bournemouth town centre, the redevelopment of the big site is unlikely to come forward on its own, because the requirement to build a brand new conference and exhibition centre is extremely expensive and has been estimated in around anywhere between 150 and 250 million pounds, according to various reports that have been done over the years. In order to kind of make that remotely viable from a private investor perspective, you'd need to go up. And at the moment, the draft local plan is suggesting limiting development to 7 stories in that part of town. So the amount of viability that you could extract from a one-site approach is unlikely to be attractive to any investor. And so the kind of, to address the question that came from Councillor Waite earlier, the more ambitious bit is to create an opportunity by parcelling up various different council-owned sites within the town centre that in their totality would create a quantum of development that would be an attractive proposition for an investor, because they could extract a considerable amount of value from one site that could cross fund the redevelopment of the big site. Clearly, a proposal of that nature takes time to develop. The governance processes need to be followed in order to make sure that the sites that are identified as potential to be included in that process are agreed, and then we'd have to go into the PCR 2015 compliant procurement process to advertise that opportunity to the market. So that the procurement aspects of that alone would be a minimum of 12 months, probably more likely to be 2 years, and that wouldn't start until any decision had been taken by the council to definitively pursue that option. As I say, BH Live has an operating lease for the next 10 years. They're doing a great job of maintaining that as a profitable venue, but it's fair to say that it continues to age, and there comes a point where small scale refurbishments and kind of redecorations don't do the job that's required to take it to the next level and to give it another 40 years of life.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, I'm going to take Councillor Aikenhead first, and then Cameron. And then I think we'll be approaching the end of this debate. Thank you.
Thank you. So the good thing about coming a bit later on in the debate is that one of my questions has already been answered. So thank you, Councillor Waite, for asking it, and I'm really looking forward to the briefings, and thank you for your answer on that as well. Because I was going to ask for more detail about the swimming pool, but yeah, that's great. My other question I've got is about I see that you have written in the Bournemouth development about that you will be thinking about percentage of affordable housing and inclusion of build to rent housing. I'd quite like to hear just a little bit more about of all three developments, how much social housing to rent you think we'll be able to get into it. And just to ask whether, when you're considering viability in terms of putting in social housing to rent, are you considering that we may be able to get additional funding perhaps from another pot in order to build that? And also in terms of viability, it's not so much whether it's viable to do it on each site, but whether it's more viable to do it there than somewhere else, because we've got to build it somewhere. So I just really wanted to get a little bit more detail on the thinking behind affordable housing, social housing for rent in these areas.
Any volunteers? Councillor Howell?
Well, the real opportunity for affordable housing is on the Holes Bay site. So we will be looking to achieve a significant amount. I mean, I think under the agreement, the LEP, that we are required anyway to deliver 80 units, but certainly in the context of the total number of dwellings that we might get on that site, I would like to see significantly more. In terms of the dolphin pool, we have looked at this, but it doesn't fall within the council housing team's desired or allocated locations for affordable housing, and that combines with the fact that we are trying to make it as self-funding as possible mean that it's unlikely, I think, that affordable housing will be delivered on that site. I'm not aware that we have been considering affordable housing on the big site for obvious reasons. In terms of winter gardens, that is something that previously I have argued for in terms of the previous application. The previous application didn't include any affordable housing.
The previous application for that site commuted the affordable housing from the Winter Garden site onto the Eden Glen site. There was a quid pro quo that was going on, which nobody. I can see that Councillor Bartlett is shaking his head, because there was always that question of, was it ever going to happen? But they were going to deliver it elsewhere. So I think we have to sort of almost bin what was there before. We have to go back to square one with that site, because we're now looking at whether we need the parking and the leisure, and whether the new local plan will allow us to do something different. So I think, you know, the previous application did not include affordable housing, but the new one, you know, we do the best that we can. The reality is there are other things that we have to factor in that we didn't have to factor in before. So, you know, we have a major problem with biodiversity net gain in Holes Bay, because the longer that site is empty, the more nature takes it over, and the more costly that becomes, the more difficult the contamination issues are, the more expensive that is, and we can't have everything. It's just not possible to have everything. And we get to the point eventually where there are still people out there who need homes that don't need social homes, and providing nothing for nobody is probably worse. We've got to start delivering properties. There is 25,500 homes we've got to deliver, of which several thousand need to be social homes, but there's 20,000 plus that aren't going to be social homes, and we've got to start delivering those as well.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I mean, every time the council spends money on delivering affordable housing, you know, it makes, you know, it means it reduces the number of total units that we can deliver. It's no, I mean, what perhaps is more important is that we try and stop homes becoming used for holiday lets, and that we have people living as much as possible in the locality that are working in the locality, or essentially have lived in the locality, you know, are living full time in the locality. And there are possibly some things that we can do in terms of the design, you know, of Holmes Bay in particular, where we can help to achieve that.
Yes, I understand. As long as we're doing the right percentage of social housing for rent, that's fine.
Cameron, thank you.
I think at this stage it's more of an observation than a question. Lots of my sort of questions were answered. Unlike most in the room, I don't actually remember the time before the PIC, so no offence. I did go to my first gig there, and I briefly decided I wanted to be a grime MC after another gig there, but that didn't work out. So I very much hope it does thrive for the next 40 years when I'm, well, maybe your age councillor, like that. But I do think the devil will be very much in the detail.
Okay, thank you.
I think the devil will be in the details of proposals come forward, and I do hope the decoupling of the sites doesn't stifle any ambition. I hear the word renovations and it doesn't overly fill me with confidence, but I really do hope they go as aspirational as they can within the limitations that they've got, because I've been to, and I know we're not going to be on the level of the NEC in Birmingham or the nice relatively new one in Manchester, but I just worry, hopefully in 40 years time it's not just another paint job and another paint job and a bit of expansion here. It's more of a constructive challenge. Let's go big or go home. But I think I'll just leave it there. I've insulted enough people. See you at standards.
Thank you very much. Councillor Canavan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could just follow up on Councillor Beese's question about process. So we've got a paper in front of us this evening, or you have, which is really a matter of report. So I'm assuming that this will go to Cabinet on the same basis, that it will be a report. So my question really is, at what point do we actually get to actually scrutinise something that looks like a decision? Because from what's being said so far, it looks as though, you know, within 6 months, it might be a bit clearer as to what BH Live think. But in terms of the more ambitious project, that's going to take a significantly longer period of time. So I'm just wanting to understand, you know, the point at which we stop talking about options and the point at which we start making or somebody starts making decisions and an opportunity arises for us to influence what those decisions might be.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Just let me be straight. This report was written specifically for the Overview and Scrutiny Board. It's not going to Cabinet, so it's up for us to decide. And you followed up with a very good question about how we do take this forward, and I think the leader wants to respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. You're absolutely right. There is no decision to be made. This is at your request, which is what's so great about scrutiny, is that it shouldn't be led by what's coming to Cabinet. It should be led by what you want to do. As I indicated earlier on, we have agreed that we will bring a 6-monthly update report for information to Cabinet. Which obviously now we've got this one, my suggestion is that we do another one sort of at the beginning of the autumn and then go on a 6-monthly cycle from there. And it may be that scrutiny chooses to call that in, or that they simply, you know, look and go, oh, well, it's a report and update. In terms of decision making, obviously the decisions were made when 6 months ago, when we decided these were going to be the priority projects. Decision gateways are around when we need to spend money or when we need to borrow money or to make those changes. So, you know, I think in terms of the decision, those will be taken by full council, because in every case, those decisions will exceed the £1 million mark. So it will therefore go through a process for a specific gateway. I don't think it's possible for us to say when are we going to make those decisions, because it depends on the direction of travel, and that's why the early engagement with the ward councillors is so important, so that those ward councillors agree with, influence and own the plan going forward, whether that be in Hamworthy, in Port Town Centre or in Bournemouth Central. So I think, you know, it's a bit early to say when we stop talking about it. One of the concerns I have with this paper is it does look like there's nothing happening. The reality is there's a lot happening, and if we rush it, we could end up blowing it all together. And as Cameron said, we want to get it right rather than rush it.
I would, Chair, I just would point out that in the dolphin pool section, there is a provisional timetable, and the Gateway Cabinet seat to proceed there would no doubt, as the leader says, be an investment decision that would require full council.
So, for clarification, do you have a development investment panel or some kind of oversight group that looks at these things?
So we have the non-exec investment panel, the investment advice panel, but looking on that grid of all the governance, we've also got all the other boards with the SRO and the senior responsible officer, etc. Rob, do you want to explain the role of the investment advisory panel?
Which ones?
All of them.
That was the HOC and the PMO and the.
Actually, I saw a note from someone earlier that pretty much got them all right. So SRO, senior responsible officer, head of services, HOS, PMO, project management office. So yeah, I think those are the ones in the paper. Yeah, but point taken about including acronyms in reports. Thank you. The investment advisory panel is essentially three of the non-exec directors that were on the board of Future Places who I think the council saw the value in retaining their expertise, and we've had an initial discussion with them around what role they want to take, and they see themselves very much an informal sounding board. Obviously, they won't make any decisions. That's for the council to make, but they have. Trying to get the right way to a Rolodex is showing my expertise. They've got little black books of connections, yeah, and so it's about assessing the projects as we move through their development, giving us advice on who we might want to talk to at particular stages, and making personal introductions to those organisations to help us, and giving us the benefit of their experience on where things have worked in the past and where they haven't, and effectively acting as a critical friend.
Thank you. Councillor Canavan, do you have anything you wish to add to that?
No, sorry, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a few questions on my own now, members. And they're going to come out in a rather random fashion, I'm afraid, because it's not particularly well organised in my head at this time of night. But the first thing I'd like to pick up on are the two-track approach to the Winter Gardens. And from what I see, what is being suggested is a replication of the arrangements for BDC, where a partner was brought in, sites allocated to within that partnership, and that in itself, whilst there were some successes, there were also things that were not so successful. It seems to me like the same mistake, there's not mistakes, but the same model is being suggested here. Okay, I'll come back if I may. I'll come back if you want to just note these points down as I go through them. Otherwise, I'll lose my train completely. So, if that is the situation, we have to look at what that model has done for us. And I get extremely frustrated when I hear the comments about early days. And I have to go, you know, the Winter Gardens has been in train now since 2011, I think, something like that. I'm not even sure it exists as a project within Muse, because Winter Gardens Limited has shut this project down and wrote off £10 million in the process, of which the £5 million were a contribution from this council. And I see us going over the same ground. If you remember, we stalled the project, which had gained planning consent It was gained, and it was then put on hold because Future Places wanted to review it within light to a bigger, different type of development that maybe encompassed the BIC. We've gone back 180 degrees on that process now and come back to one option is to focus on developing the winter gardens. Plus the other option of bringing a partner in some way. So, you know, from a resident's perspective, I think, well, it's all right. You know, all these years have gone past. We spent 10 million quid, and now it seems we've gone back to square one, and we don't still know what the hell it is we're going to be doing. And meanwhile, the site, which we were promised at one stage, and I'm not saying this administration, at one stage, this site was going to be employed for temporary uses, temporary business to get some revenue to come in to pay for the loans that were secured to fund the development, and the interest on those loans is still being paid, including the purchase of the land. So, you know, I personally get a bit frustrated when I hear the expression that it's early days in this project, because it's not early days, it goes back years and years and years. So I have great concern about the suggestion of bringing a partner. I have great concerns about the model that we've now brought. We've closed Future Places down. We've brought them internally. A lot of those staff seems to have disappeared. That expertise that we wanted to bring on board seems to have disappeared. And now we're going to be recruiting consultants in order to bring the staff up to numbers. That's what it says in this report. It also says that we're going to use 3 of the non-exec directors that were used within Future Places. It seems to me like we're almost reinventing Future Places again within the council. I'm concerned about the issue about investment, because these developments, you can take them to a wonderful business case, but if you cannot secure or have any idea where that financing is coming from, then you're basically wasting your time. You know, where the non-exec directors could come in, and I agree with this, is if they have got access to people in the finance world, you know, the pension funds and all the rest of them, if that is indeed possible. But surely the first question is not just the viability. The first question is, where's the money coming from? If we can find out where the money's coming from, and there's a realistic chance of getting funding for these developments, then we can go for it. But if there's not, then we're wasting our money. We may well be wasting our money for another 10 years. Just going back to the BDC at the moment and the winter gardens, they have an option on that. You're hamstrung there because the only option you have got is to go with the BDC in some way. They have the option on the site. That's a legal option. You can do nothing about it unless you buy it out, or you use them, or you wait till that option expires through the time. So you see, I'm on a bit of a rant here, but you know, you know, there, you know, you talk about affordable housing. Actually, the Winter Garden site had 3 of those 4 blocks allocated to private rented sector. They were going to be owned by the council. That's where the investment was going to come. There was a big issue about funding or financing coming from Homes England, and apparently that all fell off the rails or for whatever reason. So are they involved? They'll only be involved, won't they, if there's affordable housing. So, you know, what is the relationship with Homes England now? And are they supportive of the things that we're hoping to do? Clearly for whole space site, that would be a major factor, I would imagine, in the, you know, the feasibility of developing the site, I would imagine. Have I finished? Probably I've said enough already, but I mean, I've given you a lot of comments there. I don't wish to just, you know, sort of moan about it, but I really am concerned that we are throwing good money after bad, and we've got to make sure that we've got the money available and we've got viable developments that are going to be reflective of what we need in terms of housing. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, hopefully I'll be able to put your minds at ease to some degree. Certainly in relation to the twin track approach and the more ambitious model, it's in no way meant to be a new BDC model. What we'll be talking about is developing a package of sites that could be developed in a coherent way to deliver one project that would really lift the area. So it's not like we take one bit and then decide at a later stage that we're doing something else. It is a single proposition. I absolutely agree, and indeed I said earlier that as far as I'm concerned, the most critical thing that we need to sort out is our approach to attracting investors. All our sites will need external investment in some form. We have relationships with Homes England throughout the council. There are lots of different ways into Homes England, lots of different teams, but we need to be better as a council understanding where all those contacts are and driving forward with a plan to really get the most out of Homes England. We're not one of their priority areas, but we do understand that they're still very keen to invest in this area. You know, Winter Gardens was, you know, for me personally, it was a disappointment because I going back to the 2019, we inherited as a new council the Unity Alliance, which was then a project on that site which the previous administration had developed. We made the decision that it was a good scheme and that we would continue to develop it. When that administration was dethroned, the new administration that came in decided that they would try and link that site to the BIC, and therefore that scheme was dropped. There were, I mean, it wasn't financially viable at that point but that doesn't mean it couldn't have been built. You know, the council invests in lots of things that aren't financially viable by finding additional sources of funding from elsewhere within the council. So that was, you know, a political decision that we have now unwound, largely because we want to get things done, and the way to get things done is to be, you know, make things as simple and coherent as they can be, but while importantly keeping an open mind and a spirit of creativity that allows you to deliver something that of quality that meets the aspirations of local people. You know, mentions about meanwhile use on the site. We have, particularly in terms of Holes Bay, talked about meanwhile use. The council currently is not really, to be honest, flexible enough and responsive enough to really grab hold of meanwhile use opportunities, and that's something that we need to improve. We need to just recognise that in certain situations that the way to get meanwhile use up and running is just to go for it, spend a small amount of money, put a few shipping containers on a site and see how it goes without, you know, overlaying it with too much of the council bureaucracy. That's something we need to work through. In terms of the recreating future places, that's very much not what we're doing. I was being quite shocked actually about some of the practices within future places and also some of the, you know, certainly they're focusing on far too many things, and I think we've inherited a really good team. I think that the actual team was doing a good job within future places, but too much was being asked of them in a too kind of scattergun way. And what we've done is bring the team in-house. Some people have left because they found better paying jobs. Some people have left because they didn't really want to work for a council, and the process, 2P process, brought them in as a matter of fact, and they always intended to leave. There's other reasons that, you know, for career development or whatever, that people have left, but I'm really confident that the people that I'm working with, the people who are leading the projects, are really good people with the right skills to be working on these projects, and they are really keen to deliver on these projects. And in order to keep that team and to build on it, we've got, as a council, remain committed to these projects and to give them the resources they need in order to deliver, because regeneration is really difficult. And you know, I think in some, because it takes a long time, you know, some people take the approach that, well, you know, it's a process, but actually you've got to take every opportunity along the way to move things forward, and you've got to keep dynamism in the process, and we've got to be careful that the council doesn't, you know, kill that dynamism. So, you know, it's that balance between bringing in the important processes and controls that the council should have and has, it is indeed bringing to the future places kind of model, but also maintaining that ability for the people that are working on the projects to deliver. I just one thing on pay that I think that is worth saying, that you were talking about pay and rewards earlier. There is a bit of a danger that the pay and rewards process is taking so long that it's already a year out of date by the time, you know, it's sorted out. And there's the danger that, you know, we're competing, particularly in this area, against the private sector, and the private sector wages, salaries are increasing at a fast rate. I think the only other points I'd like to make, I think, is on BDC and Muse. I mean, I think you were questioning whether that was really going anywhere. Were you?
I was, because I didn't even think it was on our own capital programme. It was certainly removed last year. It was removed the same way as Cotman's Road was removed off of our own capital programme, and I don't know if it's been put back on. And well, it was certainly for the Winter Gardens Development Company, they stopped their project because they wrote off £10 million, and I'm not even sure that is moving forward with them as a company.
Well, I think unfortunately that we are likely to have a pretty much complete redesign on the project because of partly because the parking and commercial property elements, but also because
Can I just stop you there? Why can't we just develop, assuming it can be viable, why can't we just go ahead with the current planning consent?
Because it's not viable because of the car parking and the commercial element. So they would, at the very least, I mean, I think I'm going to have to defer to Rob here.
I'll just question you on I remember that the development specifically because the leisure aspect of it had been reduced to only 7% of the overall development from what was originally one of the main components of development. The viability issues forced it to reduce that, and part of that equation was the fact that the PH2 development was made, which allowed that, and I agree with that analysis, but it did result in a much smaller leisure bit, and there was virtually no commercial thing. It was essentially a residential development. And I accept that it also included a car park, but I don't personally see there anything wrong with having a car park. But of course, if that is the one element that stops you from developing it, it needs to be looked at. But it doesn't necessarily require you to redesign the whole programme. You know, you are nearly there, frankly, from the design that was approved. So I'm just, you know, this going around the buoy again and all these different options and everything, and we're going to take years and years to move it forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think I should ask Rob to comment, but just specifically when we mentioned car parking, we're talking about the public car parking element. So just there would be private car parking relating to the site, but it is, it is unfortunate that we've had these changes in approach that have happened because of change administration. I have asked several times whether it's possible to build out, the current application, and the messaging we're getting back is that really that's we're effective in it looking at a substantial redesign of the project in order to make it viable.
Thank you. Members, any further comments? All right, thank you. Chief Exec, did you want to say something? Thank you.
And just to pick up your point at the end about the capital programme, we took the commitments out of the capital programme, but that's on the basis that when we get a viable scheme, if we need something that we need to fund, then we'll bring it back to the council with a business case. So that was all we did. We just took the future commitments out so that we could reduce the borrowing headroom as a total. We've always said, yeah, if there's a viable business case, we'll bring it back to the council to approve.
Yes, thank you, Chief Secretary. You did actually remind me of a line in the report that says that you intend to capitalise 350k or something. The hope aspiration was that you could capitalise some of the costs of the development team. So, and I understand that. Thank you. Okay. Okay, we'll wind that one up. At the moment, I think in terms of taking it forward, we will wait for the the 6 monthly reports to come out, and that gives an opportunity to look at it again. I think it's early days still. It's still early days, and I know the team is still sort of at the state of flux. So I don't think it prove any value in asking for yet another report. We'll wait until you're going to put one out to cabinet, and then we'll see where we go from there. Thank you. So we'll now come to the forward plan. Right. Just to explain that there were some changes since the last meeting. One of them was we were due to have the seafront strategy at this meeting. Unfortunately, the paper was not available, and so it's moved on to our next meeting. That gave us the opportunity to look at the corporate plan this evening, which I think was worthwhile, and we did that. I think, yeah, in June, we are going to consider the MTFP and future budget strategy. I think that's in there already. And included in that will be the probably the outturn, the financial outturn for last financial year. That'll form part of that analysis. Yeah, I think we always agreed that we would bring those things together with the MTFP wherever possible. Okay, there was just one thing I've already alluded to it earlier on, and that was about the discussion we've had with the chair of place and environment about housing, and I hope that we will be able to have an inquiry day. Do I have the committee's agreement or dissent that would appear to be something that the committee would like to pursue?
Yes.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. And I will work with the chair of that committee to see how we might be able to facilitate that, and also bring in the other committees as well, as we suggested. Right, I'm going to invite our democratic services officers to input.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just input a little bit further on that finance item for June? We've been talking with you and the other chairs. We haven't yet spoken with the committee about this, but we are also talking with the leader and the chief executive about maybe doing a wider finance item if the timings line up and there's resources available to be able to do that. So that if you were interested in doing some more sort of detailed working group type pieces of work on the budget as it develops, to work with the executive on the budget, that would be like a springboard item. So I just wanted to check if there is a will from the committee to have that wider item in June, if we can, if officers can bring that. I know that they are quite pressed to be able to pull these through. So
Mr. Chair, can I just interject? One of the problems, of course, is we've got half the committee missing. Because we've got essentially, we got standing people, so, I mean, yeah, if it's manageable, I think in principle, we'd probably go with that.
And committee, just checking the cabinet floor plan. Currently scheduled is the pay and reward update for June. You did previously say you wanted to receive that. I know that that's very much dependent on work with the unions, but I'm presuming that you do still want to receive the cabinet report update on pay and reward when it is available.
Can I just say, yeah, I think what's happened is the timing is shifted. It's unlikely, I think, probably Chief Exec to be available for June, given the current status of negotiations.
I think that's right, and unless we get a positive ballot result at the end of May, in which case we'll bring an urgent report through, because we'd want to bring it through as good as we can. But that's probably the only circumstance I can see us hitting that.
Yeah. But from my own personal perspective on this, I think it's absolutely essential that we understand what the pay and reward system is, with the structure behind it, and that we're content with it. It will, of course, go to council. No, I'm not sure it will go to full council. Chief Exec has the authority to approve it.
We'll confirm the process when we have an outcome, and then confirm which financial limits it hits.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Thought on that. If the pay and review if the vote is a yes, then that's all nice and happy and we're going forward. But if the votes, isn't it more important that we talk about it if the vote's a no, because then don't we to put it together? Okay.
Yeah.
So, Chair, just to clarify, at the moment, I think that there is in red in your draft work plan a local transport plan item. We're expecting that will probably move for June, and we will put in the pay and reward item to come through whenever it's available. But your June meeting could potentially be quite full, so just to bear that in mind.
Yeah, the local transport plan. This has been raised as an important issue, and I think back to when we started working on the local plan, we were hoping that the transport plan could be worked alongside it, and would it actually, hopefully, sit beside the new local plan. It appears that is not going to be the case. It seems to be that the local transport plan is sort of nowhere near where that sort of maturity, and it's in its very, very embryonic stages, and that's probably why we can't get it at our meeting as scheduled. That's the view, certainly from the highways team, but we need to discuss that a bit more, because we don't want to just do pre-decision scrutiny on that. We want to see it as early as we can, to see if we need to modify the strategy if appropriate. So the call for it was exactly right. I think it was you, Kate, wasn't it, that originally asked for it on the list? And I think we should do it. It's a question of when we can do it usefully.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's really helpful to hear. Obviously, discussion ongoing, but it is a little bit concerning that people saying, "Oh, well, it's not ready," and I don't want it to end up like the local plan where it comes just before the decision. The whole point is we should be feeding in earlier and having more opportunity, more time to shape and
interesting
stage.
I got to disagree with you about the plan. There was a working group commissioned from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that worked alongside the planning team, the strategic planning, for about 18 months at least.
All right, I know, and I know my knowledge only goes back a year, so I'm sorry. I don't mean to. I'm not. But from my participation in the ONS board, it didn't come to the board. This board, the board that was constituted a year ago, until just before. But I know there was lots of other stuff going on in oversight. I do understand that. But I think I worry that if we say, oh no, just push it on, eventually we end up where we don't get it to come to this meeting until we're quite close to a decision, and that would be.
No, we understand that. Yeah. Thank you.
No, just to give you an assurance as well, that we are communicating with officers informally in the background on that, and we are very clear on you around that. You don't want it last minute, but also just to say that there is a transport advisory group that's now been set up, and that group needs to decide its role in the local transport plan development. So the only sort of caveat I'd say to that is that it doesn't stop overview scrutiny looking at it. You have your right to look at it, but we don't want to duplicate work. So at some point, we do need to decide how those sit together.
Yeah, I'm on the LTP4 working group. Hasn't met for a really long time. Not sure what's going on there. I will ask. The transport advisory group though is something slightly separate. I don't know if that's because that's a slightly separate organisation. I didn't think that was quite as much aligned with LTP4, but maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Okay, members, there are two other things I just wanted to mention very quickly. One is that we have received a request for scrutiny regarding some sensitive issues regarding arms sales and things like that, and also and it really focuses on the holdings of the Dorset Business Pension Fund. Sorry, not the business, the Dorset Pension Fund. And we're waiting for some advice on the monitoring officer about the wording associated with that. But we have received it. I haven't replied to you specifically because we are waiting for some advice from the monitoring officer. The second point I wanted to make is I've received a letter directly from Tobias Selwood, which questions the veracity, if you like, of the overview scrutiny that we've already carried out on the sale of Wessex Field. And he requested another investigation of that. I've replied to him today to say that we've already given it as much transparency as we possibly can. It is quite clear, and there was an overall support for that throughout the council, and there are absolutely no grounds or basis to do another investigation, and I've advised him to that effect. So anybody else for any more? Yeah.
I did put in a request a while ago. I lost track of it regarding the nutrients bill, the impact on development, obviously specifically to the Avon catchment. And I'm not sure if it's this or if it's actually another committee. Sorry. Is it been transferred or is it? Do I need to make representation to that committee?
I always do, leader.
So I just thought it might be worthwhile just letting you know that I was at the opening of Liscombe, which is the Dorset Wildlife Trust and Natural England's newest reserve, Friday, and had quite a significant conversation with the representative from Natural England about the Christchurch catchment. And they have agreed to have a conversation with our team about bridging issues in advance of the 2030 improvements to the Wessex, to the Christchurch wastewater recycling plant. What I was advised was, so we were expecting the update on the nutrients on the 1st of April. It then got put off till after the election, and the indication I got on Friday was that we are within days of getting that outcome. So once that outcome has been provided to the senior officers, they're going to need a little while to interpret it and issue. But the expectation is that it will just change things, and therefore scrutinising it is sort of irrelevant because the decision is going to be made by government about what we're allowed to do, and we'll have to just get on and do it because we've got properties that are completely finished and just awaiting the clearance of a preoccupation condition. And I think if it was to be delayed by an attempt to scrutinise it, that would be quite unhelpful. So I think we're imminent, but I think it is worth asking what are our plans to help to unlock across the whole piece. And there's quite a lot of work happening, but I think you're probably right, Lindsay. I think it probably is place.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Thank you very much. If you could just copy me in on that response. I mean, that's obviously quite encouraging. If this, sorry, was that Natural England that you spoke to regarding this, or was this the Wildlife Trust? Because obviously it's Natural England that said it.
Through you, Chair. it was Natural England I spoke to. I also had a very interesting conversation with National Trust about some other work they want to do with us going forward. So it was a really worthwhile event, and over the coming couple of weeks, I would expect that as they develops, I'll be able to update everybody.
Thank you, Leader. There was somebody else put their hand up. Oh, yeah, Councillor Sam.
Thank you. It was just thank you for referring to the request that I've sent in on behalf of the Green Group. I just did want to clarify though that it's a request around divestment, broadly around divestment, not specifically around arms sales. It's about ethical investments. So it does also refer to divestment from fossil fuels. I think those are the examples we gave, but we wouldn't be limiting ourselves to talking about a specific single issue. It would be around exploring our investments in the pension fund.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah,
I think probably on most of what you said, probably do need to alter the wording a bit on the request, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
thanks.
All right, thanks.
Okay, members, thank you very much. It's been a long session, but we had some really interesting topics tonight, and hopefully we've added some value. So good night, and see you again next time. Thank you.